You were talking about immune system in general, and even things like things that would make you more resilient towards getting the flu, right? Or other just general viruses that we would expose through. Let's throw a few tidbits out for the audience that's listening and watching. What are some examples of some things that radically can support the immune system? Foods that we all may know of, but might not be including on a regular basis.
Let's start with one of my favorites, which is blueberries, right? So blueberries are blue because they contain a natural dye that is colored blue that is called anthocyanin. And anthocyanins have been found to be powerful activators of our immune system in a beneficial way. So they don't cause autoimmune disease. They actually elevate our T cells and natural killer cells. These are part of the super soldiers that make up our immune system. They just kind of like give more weapons to our immune system to defend against invading armies. And just by eating like a cup and a half of blueberries a day, you can elevate your T cells by like 88%. Okay. And athletes that actually eat blueberries regularly, they just walk around with a higher level of immunity to begin with. It's kind of a performance maintainer, not an enhancer. It's a maintainer because your immune system is also firing at peak. Now, what's also interesting is that the same anthocyanin lowers inflammation. So this is a classic dilemma that is out there in the wellness world. Like, yeah, we want to get rid of inflammation. So we want to make sure our immune system isn't overactive. Well, look, inflammation is a subset of immunity. We want good, strong immunity to protect us from invaders, and we want to also lower inflammation at the same time. Blueberries can actually do that. Another great way of actually elevating immunity is with broccoli. Now, broccoli contains a natural compound called sulforaphane. It's actually a family of different natural chemicals that kind of give broccoli its kind of unique taste. It's also in kale, chard, all these other kinds of salad vegetables, honestly. But broccoli is particularly strong in. And it's been shown that actually you can actually boost your T cells, again, the super soldiers of your immune system, by just eating broccoli. But here's like a little pro tip and a little tiny hack. If you want to get as much as you can out of broccoli, you should eat normal adult broccoli. But here's the thing. The tree tops are good, but the stems have twice as much of the sulforaphane. So don't throw the stems away when you're cooking it. If you don't want to saute the stems, there's plenty of recipes you can use with stems. You can put it into a blender, turn it into a soup, a little broccoli oregano soup. Amazing. You put a little vegetable stock in there. It's like a really tasty way of actually using broccoli and getting more of these sulforaphanes. But if you really want to like rock it with your broccoli sulforaphanes, you eat broccoli sprouts. These are the 3 to 4 day old baby broccoli. And it turns out that the broccoli sprouts have 100 times more sulforaphane than the grown-up broccoli. So, and actually the study's been done looking at the people getting the flu vaccine. These are 20-year-olds, healthy 20-year-olds, just getting the flu vaccine. And it was found that if you gave the flu vaccine and gave somebody broccoli, a shake made out of broccoli sprouts, you could ramp up their immune response by 22 times. So like really just amp up your immune system without causing inflammation.
It seems very deliberately, since the beginning of your career and your TED Talks all the way up to today, so much of your attention is focused on adding in. You really want the audience to add in and the readers to add in. And I'm curious about that, from your perspective of how you arrived there, and how much does the balance come in terms of adding in versus, as you were talking earlier, with artificial sweeteners in the gut microbiome, that there's certain foods that just by taking them out, we allow the body to do what it does naturally. How do you think about that balance?
Yeah. Well, look, first of all, I'm like most people, I think. When you tell me not to do something, my brain goes, well, maybe I'll do it one more time. Maybe I'll try it. And so there's a lot of human nature to how we respond when somebody says something to take something away from you. And human nature abhors deprivation. And so one of the things is, I think most of us like to have our quote cake and eat it too. And so I always felt when I was, taking care of patients and trying to counsel them on things, rather than tell them to remove things from their diet, because that's really easy to do. And there's plenty of people out there, scolding people. Fear, guilt, and shame is sort of like the building blocks of traditional counseling about nutrition. And it makes you feel bad actually when somebody tells you, like you're a bad person for eating junky food. What I try to is empower people, because I think people love to feel justified in what they like. And so in my book, I read about 200 foods that all activate the body's health defenses. And I used to say, I dare you to find in this 200 foods something like that. I dare you to find, review this foods and tell me that there's nothing that you like. And most people actually find something in 200 foods that they actually like. And I say, well, look, start with this, because what you like is already good for you. So you're already way ahead of the game. And if you can keep on adding things that you like, and just understand, this is that education knowledge piece, what you like is good for you, then you can love your food and love your health at exactly the same time. And then this whole idea of anti-deprivation is that if you spend more time thinking about what to add to your body that's good for you, you'll spend less time thinking about the bad stuff, and more good things in your body kind of push out room for bad things. And if you spend most of your time fortifying your body's health defenses, those 5 health defenses, angiogenesis, stem cells, microbiome, DNA protection, and immunity, with foods, honestly, every now and then you're going to fall off the wagon. You can eat something you really like, or you really want to, or everybody's eating it around you, and it's not that good for you. That's all right. Your body's got you covered. Your health defenses are there as a shield. So again, I think that there's just a healthier way to navigate through your life. These strict diets don't work for a long time. They're unsustainable. So I'm all about, how do you actually get people to feel like they're in control, and what they like to do already is actually good for them.
No, that's a great explanation. You're crowding out the quote unquote bad. I mean, there really is no bad, because the beautiful thing about it is that, there's this term that's coming out now more with blood sugar and continuous glucose monitors. And the idea is, metabolic flexibility, that when you have a diet that is maintaining a healthy blood sugar on an average basis, then you go somewhere, you want to enjoy something, you enjoy that thing. You're not having the stress of, this thing is going to completely throw me off, because your foundation is so healthy, so resilient, that you can enjoy some of these things, because food is not just about fueling our body and avoiding disease. It's all about the joy, social aspects, breaking bread together, so to speak. And that adds a lot to life, including severely reducing stress. And I find that the healthier that I become with the foundation, and having a ton of plant foods inside of my diet by volume, I would still say most of the calories, by calorie, it's still probably a little bit heavily reliant on the healthiest quality animal foods that I can find, wild caught fish, grass fed steak, things like that I'll throw in. But by volume, it's still plants. When I have that base, I also have less desire for these other things. So instead of eating the whole croissant, I was in Mexico City recently, and we came by an incredible bakery. I just wanted a little taste. I wanted to get the idea of it. I had a little bit, and I was like, that's cool, because I never feel deprived. I never feel that I have to use willpower to say that I can't eat something, or that it's bad for me. No, this is something that I can enjoy. I get the point, and then I can move on from there.
Yeah, I know there's this Japanese saying, harahachi bun mi, that basically says just eat 80% and then leave, like quit the clean plate club and don't eat, and just eat 80% of what your body would want. I have another, which I think is really healthy. It's kind of like your own way to actually have caloric restriction, which we know scientifically is good for you. But I have another story to tell you.
Please.
I traveled to Asia after college, and I was in China, in Beijing. And this is, soon after China, not too long after China opened up for tourism. So, this is many decades ago. And I went to visit the Summer Palace. And I've been back a few times. Obviously, this is way before the pandemic. And you can actually visit the Summer Palace where the Dowager Empress lived. And basically, this royalty of China basically was fed by imperial chefs. And it was a restaurant. So I was honored to be able to dine there. And they wanted to serve an imperial meal to show you what it was like back then. So I'll tell you, Most of it was plant based, but they had 30 different types of dishes that came out in a dinner. 30, okay? And there's no way you can eat 30 dishes, right? I mean, think about it. You go to like a steakhouse, there's no way you're going to eat 30, or you go to a vegetarian restaurant, you're still not going to eat 30 meals. So what I learned that's never left my mind was that, food is pleasurable. And the way that the approach was not to put a lot on the plate, have a lot of different variety to really be able to stimulate the taste buds, get the enjoyment of the food, make people feel like they could indulge and enjoy their meal. And the Dowager Empress would just eat with the chopsticks, just take one bite out of each plate. Okay. And just get a sampling. And so that's what I realized when you're talking about the croissant, it brought that back, my memory back to me, like you don't have to have the whole hog of whatever it is they're serving. You can actually satisfy your indulgence by having a taste of it, savoring it, like really try to enjoy it. And that way, if you give us a little bit of time, it's not going to make you want to go back and just pig down on the whole thing. You like learn how to enjoy the taste of something, allows you to experience more without having to stuff yourself.
It's well said. And I think for a lot of people who are listening here, just like you gave the example about the broccoli and the broccoli sprouts, they know food is powerful, and we're all creatures of habit. We get into buying the same sort of five, vegetables that everybody ends up having: corn, potatoes, all those classic examples, tomatoes, which obviously have a lot of healthy properties as you highlight inside of your book. But when we talk about variety and getting inspired, that's what I really love about what you guys are doing with your course and kind of extending out the book is you're giving even more inspiration, more education so that people can get excited about wanting to go try something new. So that you go into Whole Foods, you go into Trader Joe's, you go into your local supermarket, wherever it is, or shopping online, and you're like, wow, I'm actually going to pick out this other food that I kind of overlooked. What's an example of one of those things that is an underrated food, something that people overlook and might not have as part of their normal routine, but can have such a profound effect if they start including it into their diet?
Yeah, I'll tell you a great one. Kiwis, right? So these sort of, I don't know, baseball shaped, little smaller baseball, furry little brown things. You cut them open, they're beautiful and green with seeds, starburst on the inside. I didn't used to, I always liked kiwi, but I never really ate them very much. But I started doing the research on them, and kiwi is pretty amazing. First of all, it's a great source of vitamin C and fiber. And the vitamin C actually has tremendous antioxidant effect, and it can protect your DNA. And studies have been shown that actually if you eat one kiwi a day, it'll protect your DNA against damage by about 60%. If we ate 3 kiwis, it would actually help your body build any damaged DNA back by about 60%. And so here's something simple that you can peel, cut up, chop it into a yogurt, or just eat plain. It's delicious. You can put it into a smoothie that actually has this amazing ability to actually protect your genetic material. Like, that's so fundamental, and it tastes great and not too sweet. And it's got a little citrusy flavor. Then the other thing that's great about kiwi is that it's packed with fiber. Now, fiber is basically, a kiwi is essentially a prebiotic food. Its fiber feeds our gut microbiome. And studies have shown, there's a study done in Singapore that showed that just eating a kiwi, even one kiwi, overnight will start to change your gut microbiome, favoring more healthy species of bacteria. And so, like I always tell people, like, if I tell you something like that and you try a kiwi, you can't unlearn what I just told you. Every time you see the kiwi, you're going to say, you know what, I know there's something good about it. And then if you remember what that is, that's really what I try to do with my course, is really try to teach people how to make it second nature to make great choices and to be enthusiastic about it. Like, I think most people are kind of intimidated by, this is, kind of like the whole philosophy behind my course. People are intimidated by diets, right? To begin with, they're a little, maybe I didn't do so good in my life. I should do better. It's always, people go into a diet in order to try to get better. And what I try to shift that paradigm is, look, if you're serious about getting healthy, and this is the time you want to actually do it, It's not that difficult. You just got to dive in, engage. You do want to be awake. You need to be alert. And you got to realize it's not about somebody feeding you a superfood or a super supplement, and that's all you got to take every day. It's really about understanding more about you. It's self-knowledge about how your own body works, right? Like at some point, we all figured out how our eyes work and how our lungs work and how our prostate works and our uterus. Figure this out. This is like the cutting edge science. You want evidence, you want food as medicine, and you want to know that it's not about memorizing food. It's about memorizing how your body actually works, and then recognizing our bodies actually work really well to complement certain foods. And so, what does a tomato do? A tomato contains lycopene. What does lycopene do? Actually protects our prostate. Man, that's a really good thing. Also protects our breasts. That's a really great thing. You don't need to remember all the chemicals. You just need to remember that that's the way to do it. And then I try to get people to be passionate about cooking because, one of the antidotes to unhealthy eating is really trying to get back into the kitchen and preparing your own meals. You don't have to be a fancy chef. You don't even have to have a fancy palate. If you can fry an egg, you can actually cook healthy food. And that's what I try to do is to try to make people feel like lower your guard. It's not a problem. You can actually learn how to do this. And, there's nothing more satisfying to me than to actually go out and, find some great looking, healthy, fresh foods, figure out how to cook them and taste it myself. Like, it's like, like back in wood shop when you're in junior high school and you created your own toolbox. Like, man, that's really cool. I made that. And that's how I want to get people to feel excited about food as medicine. This is not hard. It is not a burden. It's not an onus. This is something that you can do. You can make for yourself.
It's powerful because, we were started off this interview by talking about how, again, well-meaning, well-intentioned researchers, practitioners, people that we look to as the voice of authority in a lot of key areas. Sometimes it's not the absence of evidence. It's just the lack of awareness of the evidence that's there. But also, we as individuals, call us consumers, people that are in charge of our own health, that are just trying to live a happy life, take care of our families. We have to take on some of that burden. I think in a way we have, and there's a lot of layers to this, but we expect a little bit too much from our doctors. We expect a little bit too much from the healthcare community. They're just doing their best, right? They're just doing their best that they can. So we have to remember that, where we need help, and thank the Lord for all the incredible medicines, many of which you've been a part of, developing, that have given us healthier lives and extending lives as well too. But on a day-to-day basis, us getting educated is so key and central, because if you don't know or care enough, then you become a victim of sort of the marketing. And the marketing could be in the health world and the wellness world, or the marketing could be towards big food companies. Again, all primarily well-intentioned. We used to be a society that was dying of not enough food, and that's where a lot of that marketing comes from. But now we're dying of having too much of, too much food, and too much of especially the wrong foods that are there, the ultra-processed foods. So empowering yourself with that knowledge, it actually is the thing that makes the difference. It makes the difference in our lives. And while we have a little bit more time over here, I think one area to geek out a little bit in is in this topic of the gut microbiome. And you mentioned a term a little bit earlier, polyphenols. Now, a lot of folks that are familiar with the term polyphenol primarily think of it as an antioxidant. But in your book and in your continued work, you started to highlight that this is so much bigger than that. Polyphenols, which I'd love for you to define and give some examples of, they actually operate as sort of like gut modulators inside of our bacteria. And they're like orchestrators in terms of keeping us healthy when it comes to our microbiome, which has all sorts of implications. So let's talk about polyphenols a little bit more and give us some of the highlights of some of the research that you came across in that area.
Right. Well, so, let's take the word down, polyphenol, and break it down into what it actually means. A phenol is something a chemist would understand. You could give a chemist a piece of chalk and a chalkboard, and they would draw what that chemical structure looks like. And a poly of the phenol. It just means there's a lot of those little chemical structures floating around. And that's all you really need to know about the chemistry of what a polyphenol is that it's kind of a building block, and there's lots of different ways to construct polyphenol. So polyphenol is not a single molecule or a single chemical. It's actually a family. And so, I sort of think about it in the best possible way. It's sort of like ammunition, like ammo. And so there's different types of ammo that you can actually give your body and give your microbiome as well. And the polyphenols belong into different categories. So you've got tea polyphenols, you've got cacao polyphenols, you've got fruit polyphenols, and any one of these foods have more than one kind. And so it's part of the diversity and richness of any single food that we actually have. And, what I love to think about is, for example, red grapes have polyphenols. And when you actually make wine, it's the polyphenols that actually have the same coloring that gives the red wine this characteristic color. And the stuff that settles at the bottom of the vat when you make wine, that's also really, really rich with polyphenols, which is why red wine is richer with polyphenols than white wine. But that's not the only thing that has polyphenols. Tea also has polyphenols, as we talked about EGCG. And we tend to kind of gravitate towards understanding one or two, but there are thousands of polyphenols in a cup of tea.
Many which we don't even have a name for yet.
We don't even have a name for half of them. Like the most undiscovered country is not outer space. It's actually inside our food. It's like the inner space of our fruits and vegetable, the produce section, and also some animal proteins as well. I think there's some really amazing things in seafood, shellfish, seaweed, things that are not classically, grown on a farm. And so that's what's exciting to me is discovering these things. There are polyphenols in almost every fruit and vegetables, where you're talking about a cherry or a cranberry, or whether you're talking about a plum. You've got polyphenols that are there, and there are even polyphenols in tree nuts that can actually be very beneficial as well. So I think that the term polyphenol is known as an antioxidant, but for example, when we eat them, let's just use green tea as a great example of polyphenols. You sip a cup of tea. Our body absorbs some of it. Some of the polyphenols, like EGCG, the epigallocatechin gallate, actually feeds our gut microbiome. The bacteria also get to share in whatever it is that we consumed, whether it's tea or fruit. And so the bacteria are digesting these polyphenols. As they're digesting these polyphenols, the bacteria are creating their own metabolites, right? So anytime we put in something in, gets crunched, and then there's metabolites that come out. Same thing as a bacteria. And what the bacteria produce, you mentioned the sort of the orchestra producing music. The bacteria produce these other metabolites called short chain fatty acids, sometimes called SCAFAs. There's three main ones that are made. The number doesn't matter, but really, I mean, unless you're like really hardcore about it, but these short chain fatty acids, actually, they help lower cholesterol in our bloodstream. Another one actually lowers inflammation, which is a really good thing. Another one actually helps our blood sugar, our body use blood sugar better. And some of them are anti-angiogenic. They starve cancers by cutting off the blood supply. They groom our circulation as well. And so here's sort of this daisy chain of effect, where Mother Nature's put something into the food is consumed by us, we absorb some of the good stuff, and it activates our body's cells, but some of it also goes to our bacteria, and our bacteria also get to get the upside of whatever we ate that's good stuff, and they digest it and produce their own metabolites. So we produce metabolites from polyphenols, our bacteria produces polyphenols, and that's all part of this incredible health defense systems. The more good stuff to eat with polyphenols, the more we actually benefit from it. And we start to flood our own system with the good stuff, which leaves less room for the bad stuff. Crowding out is what you were talking about.
Today, we're talking about a few top superfoods that you've identified that can radically help people up-level their health if they work for them. But a lot of these work for a lot of people. And we're going to get to that in a second.
Right.
And I want to jump right in by talking about the first one because it's something that you're very excited about.
Yes.
And that's black cumin seed. Why is that one of your first and number one superfoods on this list that I have right here in front of me?
So it's a really, really powerful anti-inflammatory. But before that, it's something that has been part of my rotation since I was a child. It's very prevalent in Egypt. It's sourced from Egypt. And so we've always had it in oil form or seed form from a culinary perspective, but also sort of helps you not get sick, which was the simplest way my parents would describe it. And so you just listen to your parents. And then fast forward to what it is I do now, I started to research it more to understand it, to incorporate it with my clients. And I found that it has really powerful antiviral, antibacterial properties and is really, really great for performance when it comes to athletes, which is what I do specifically. So it's something that I always used, and it seems to reduce inflammation at rapid pace for my athletes post-play. And I wanted to understand more research that might be out there on it because it's starting to become more popular. And so I started to find research around people replacing their arthritis medication with it, for example, or it helping with candida overgrowth. And it's touted as able to cure everything but death, which seems very dramatic, but it does have so many wide varying benefits. And then taking it one step further, we had, something happened over the class course of the few years here. And I was noticing that very few of my clients and athletes were getting sick, and then looking into more research and finding its ability to reduce viral loads. And so all of that put together made me make it like a most valuable player ingredient. And so my clients will take a tablespoon of the oil a day, or we'll still use it from a seed perspective. But there's a particular compound in there, which I'm going to butcher, called thiaquinone. And that's the active compound that seems to have so many incredible benefits. And there's a lot of research that exists on it, but there's now more focus. So I'm excited to see additional research. And when I say studies on it, it's also double-blind studies, which is like, yes. So it's something that I just used because my parents told me to. And then doing what I do professionally now, being like, okay, this is really interesting. There's more to this than just like mom said.
I got a couple questions about how your parents used it, but first, my science writer on my team, her name is Taylor, nutritionist and science writer. She was the first person that really sort of highlighted to me, during the pandemic and everything, when people were having a hard time getting back their smell,
right,
that there was a protocol with black cumin seed
right,
that a lot of people were using
right,
to address sort of the inflammation. It seemed that people were losing their smell long term because
Yep.
the inflammation could not break that cycle and was affecting certain cells that control
Yep.
control everything with smell. And shout out again to Taylor because she gave that sort of protocol to a few people and said, try it. And it worked for a bunch of people.
Yeah. I had a client's friend who came in and had not had his sense of smell for a year. And he's someone that's somewhat skeptical around nutrition. And I was like, just try this for 3 weeks. Let me know what happens. I did a tablespoon 3 times a day for him of black seed oil, and then 2 tablespoons of ashwagandha a day. And within 10 days, I was in the other room and he was eating and he goes, holy shit. He's like, I can taste the cinnamon. And he's like, okay, Mary, I think you're onto something. And I'm like, you think I'm onto something? It's my first day. You think I'm onto something. So it was really cool to see that. And there's definitely something to black cumin seed that's really fascinating. So much so that I'm formulating a supplement with some of the scientists that work with Thorne to put together a compound where the star ingredient is black cumin seed.
So when you give it to the athletes that you work with today, and we'll talk a little bit more about that and how you work with them, let's say if it's for maintenance and just helping them stay in a good place with their immune system, et cetera, all the benefits that you mentioned, how much are you giving to them and what sort of form, and are you sourcing it from anything in particular that our community could benefit from until your supplement arrives one day in the future?
Sure. Tablespoon a day for maintenance. Post game, we'll do a couple of days of 2 tablespoons a day. And then if they are sick with something, the protocol shifts, and that is client dependent. So I won't throw out anything around that. And it's an oil. I use Zatique. They source from a single farm in Egypt. Incredible founders of that company. That's actually who I'll be sourcing from for my
You said use
supplement as well.
What was the name of the company?
Zatique.
Zatique.
Yes. Zatic. Tik. Pardon me. And I will, from a culinary perspective, use seeds when I'm fermenting foods, which it adds flavor. It's very peppery. I will say, if you try the oil, it's the worst thing you'll ever taste in your life.
I've tasted it before. It's intense.
I tell everyone this is the worst thing you'll ever have. I've become accustomed to it. They have capsules if you don't want to take down the oil. There's also some benefits shown with mixing it with honey. So it's not just a spoonful of sugar helps the medicine go down. It actually, there is a chemical response that they've been showed specific to COVID actually with the honey and the black seed oil. But that will make it easier to take down.
Yeah. And even if you're not dealing with right now, it could be something that people can incorporate into their routine, just like a maintenance thing.
The number of athletes I come across and retired athletes who they're definitely put off by the taste for sure in the beginning, but they stick with it. And within a few days, they'll say, like, I've had some of the greatest of all time be like, I need more of this black seed oil because I feel incredible, the pain in my joints. And these are athletes who are on some next level of wear and tear on their body. And they notice the effects of, I feel so much better on this. So it is something where if you can tolerate it and you're not one of the very, very few people who can't handle it, a non-negotiable when it comes to my clients.
So we have a whole list here that we're going to get to in a second, and then we're going to do a little background on you so our audience understands where you're coming from and your experience and what you're up to these days. Before we get into that, there is a sense is that everything we're going to be talking about today, like, it's going to make people excited. And then even separate from this, you do a lot of ingredient spotlights on Instagram. I talk about a lot of stuff. You and I both personally come across a lot of things that just seems exciting. Mm-hmm. How do you, on a most simplistic level, when people ask, when you're thinking about putting together what you take a break from, right, how you incorporate into your schedule, you can't do everything.
Right.
So how do you approach that?
Approach specifically when I'm telling a client or like the
both with
audience?
A client or for yourself?
So I always start with actual tests. So you do blood testing, gut testing. If you're an athlete, we'll do sweat and spit analysis because I do want to know what is actually happening to your body. I do say, superfood for one person could be kryptonite for another person. So always understanding what's going on under the hood. And these are tests that are covered by insurance. So it's not necessarily like something that you have to shell a lot of money for. And from there, we can get an idea of things we want to focus on. If someone doesn't want to start with that, I tell people, if you're approaching this for the first time, look up an ingredient. Look up the benefits of an ingredient from a culinary perspective. Now take it one step further and look up what's a minimal effective dose required for you to see a difference in your body. And what's the minimal effective prescription of cadence you should be taking it, and try that for a period of time. And I do that with caffeine a lot. Caffeine has pros and cons, and I really like to lean on the minimal effective dose to see how that's going to help me perform. So there's different ways to approach it, whether you want to do it through actual blood testing and seeing what you need, or just getting a basic understanding. And this information is available on the internet and through different studies that you can easily access. I do distill them in the highlights I do on my Instagram, but I always say I want you guys to dive deeper because if, for example, you're on a medication and turmeric might interact with that, that's something that is so individual that you do need to take it a step further. So it's always a jumping off point. Now, for my clients, we get very detailed. I start with a gut reset, which is a fasting mimicking protocol and an elimination diet, and then start to introduce things, and we're documenting every day. And I feel like that sounds intense to your average person, but to your average person, I really feel like you should treat your body like you are an athlete. But performance nutrition is for everyone. Everyone's performing on some level in their day-to-day lives. So I don't know how to get people excited about spending more time doing this. Maybe you have figured out the way to get them excited, but it's not always going to be super simple when you want to get the most out of specific ingredients. There's a difference between eating healthy or healthier than you were before, and then really utilizing the specific benefits of specific ingredients.
Which, of course, that already is a huge step for most of the world's population, eating healthier than you were before. So anybody who's overwhelmed, like take it step by step.
Yeah.
And again, pick and choose what you decide to move forward with. It's like anything in life. Something gets you excited, you resonate with something. There's probably some sort of vibrational frequency or something going on where it's like, that's interesting. Let me look into it.
Right.
You mentioned something earlier that I think is just, we should tease it out a little bit. You said somebody's superfood could be somebody else's, I don't know if you use the word poison, but kryptonite.
Superheroes.
Tease that out a little bit. And what are some common examples of things that are out there in the sphere of the world that even for some of the top athletes that you work with, or yourself as an example, maybe it is beneficial for somebody else, but it's not as beneficial for somebody else? Like, what's an example of that?
Don't yell, everyone. Coffee is a perfect example of that. Coffee for some people is incredible. Coffee for some people creates an autoimmune response on anxiety and more aggressive behavior and inflammation. And it could be the dose someone's taking, or it could be coffee in general. Like, I'm very sensitive to coffee. I can handle other types of caffeine, but coffee I can't. And I didn't need a test to tell me that, but later on I found out that I have a gene mutation where coffee is terrible for me. Turmeric in higher doses is terrible for me. And again, that's through testing. There's a lot of, ingredients, or a lot of sports foods and drinks right now that have beets in it, but beets could be a high inflammatory food for some people. So I'll utilize turnips for those athletes. It could really be almost any ingredient that everything you eat has a pro or a con. There's no benign food. So it's very much a sort of drilling down and listening to your body, which again can be overwhelming, and it takes time to identify those.
Yeah, it takes time. And I think a lot of functional doctors would say that just because something doesn't work for you right now may not be a sign that that thing is bad.
Right.
Like in general,
Right.
you might need to do something like a gut reset or
Right.
get to the root of it,
Right.
patch things up, deal with the leaky gut or whatever's going on. And then all of a sudden something starts to work again. So things take time, but like outline the gut reset. And is that something that our audience can do? Can they follow along?
So sort of piggybacking what you said, I always say what works for me may not work for you, and what works today may not work in 6 months. So I love that. And I really feel for functional medicine doctors, because a lot of people go to any doctor looking for an answer right away. And when it comes to gut health and wellness, it takes time to figure out what works. And then it takes an understanding that's going to shift over time. So I feel for them, because sometimes they're like, but you said, and it's like, it takes time. You have to be patient with it. And I again, really feel for them, because it can be frustrating for both ends, but it can also be really fun. I mean, my idea of fun is different than other people's fun, discovery period. So my gut reset, the reason why I do that with clients on the front end is before I run any labs, I want to know what their baseline is like without all the normal inflammatory foods that they have been eating. So I released an online version of it, I think 1.5 years ago. And it was the first time I ever released anything that I've done with my clients in that format. So the beginning of it is 3 days of a very specific bone broth. It's one of my recipes, incorporates a lot of different ingredients I grew up with that has different benefits. And you're just having that bone broth for the first 3 days and some olive oil. So that's the fasting mimicking portion of it, broth fasting. And then the next 4 days after you've done those first 3 days are the same nutrient dense foods that repeat themselves breakfast, lunch, and dinner. And it's still a calorie restriction. So it's a week that I recommend that people take it easy. I do have one athlete. She is a goat. She decided she was going to go full on boxing during it. I don't recommend it, but she's in a league of her own, and it definitely helped her in those ways. But it is something that I want people to take it easy with. And through that whole week, I'm having my clients document everything they're experiencing, because it's information. There's going to be some things that make you feel great about the reset, and there's going to be some things you don't feel good about. And it's all information. So if you get a particular rash on a part of your body, that's information. If you have a headache on the first day versus a headache on the fourth day, that's information. If you don't respond well to the fiber and the shiitake mushrooms, that's information. So from that week, we then go to a functional medicine doctor, because I work with a team of people who are much smarter than me. And we go, this is what they experienced during this gut reset. Let's run these labs, and what are the best guesses we can make with their diet moving forward until we get those results back. And it's really cool, some of the feedback I've gotten from readers who have done it, as well as some doctor's office are replacing more popular resets right now with this protocol. And I think they really love it because it focuses on whole foods. And so the way I launched it, for my clients, we make modifications and we revisit it a couple of times of the year. But for the general population, I give a format that allows them to document all of those things themselves and then take it to a functional medicine doctor, who most of them are like, I know exactly what the goal of this was, and this is amazing information for us to then to proceed.
Yeah. As somebody who's a partner in a medical clinic, the other thing that I love about this is that often when you go to a functional medicine doctor, and the context that you shared earlier is so helpful, is like they're trying their best. I'm sure there's, just like in any practice or any sort of profession, there's always good ones and there's ones that are not that great. So you got to ask around, really sort of do your homework. But additionally, the one thing that I hear constantly, and many of them have been on this podcast, is that the population set is just way sicker than before. Like people are coming in with so many more things going on than ever before. So the more that you can do a little bit of work on your end, and doing something like this gut reset is putting in that work, you're coming in, and what you would have paid for in your first appointment for them to just tell you to go do this thing, you're already having done it. And sure, maybe you didn't have any labs done up until this time, but you're coming in with feedback and information to them that's going to help them narrow in. And no doctor would know that on your first appointment without that information that's being shared there. So it's a great way to, if you are one of the few that can afford, working with a practitioner, this is a good approach to help you sort of get the best bang out of your buck.
And it is removing any of that frivolous noise in your body. So if somebody comes to me day one and they're like, okay, I want to run labs, but they had chips and some fast food the day before, your labs are going to definitely be skewed towards the inflammation that you're experiencing from the diet you've had for the first few days. But if you're, and this is my perspective, I'm not saying it's the right perspective, it's been effective in the last 10 years of what I've been doing, but it could still be anecdotal. But if you run through the reset first and then we run the labs, I have an idea of what your true inflammation is, independent of what you ate the last few days. And that's the information I'm looking for. I don't know if it's right to call it a dirty lab, but I don't want a dirty lab. I want a lab that had that ahead of us running that, because it'll just help me figure out what program I'm going to put together for my clients. Because it's not just supplements, it's ingredients, it's meal timing, it's the macros, all of it. And all of that helps me determine that.
And for people that won't be working with a doctor, or maybe don't have access to somebody who's like a functional medicine, naturopathic doctor, integrative, they can still get benefit from this. And are there any guides to, there's a lot of self-lab testing companies, or like, should they try to convince their current doctor, try to work within the insurance system? I'm sure you get this question all the time. What do you say? What do you suggest?
If you're not going to see or can't see a doctor, this is still a great jumping off point to then approach a paleo diet or a Whole30. It's a prep before you jump into a program that's going to change your diet altogether, because it'll allow you to almost very clearly see how you respond to the foods you're reintroducing. So if someone does the reset and they're like, I feel really good, what do I do next? There's a model meal program at the end of it that I included as a bonus, but it's like, okay, now go into just eating healthier proteins, vegetables, but introduce them in groupings so you can really see how you're responding to the food. And that could be enough to really change your life. And you may not even need to worry about any persistent symptoms, because they may go away, but just it'll help you become your own advocate in a lot of those ways. And so that seems to, again, the feedback I get from people is really impressive. I never tout like this is like the holy grail, but people are coming back with my Crohn's flare up is gone. I've had persistent symptoms related to a traumatic brain injury, and that seems to dissipate. The bloat that I've always had is gone. The headaches are gone. My vision is clear. And I know inflammation is this like word we use frivolously now. There's a comedian that made a whole shtick on, did you see it?
No.
Where he was like, have you been taking turmeric? And he's like, turmeric? He's like, yeah, turmeric. He's like, the thing that I buy once to make a dish and it stains all of my pots and pans. He's like, yeah. He's like, why would I take that? He goes, inflammation. He's like, what's that? He's like, general inflammation. He's like, what's that? He's like, that's the new bad thing. He's like, I thought cholesterol was bad. He's like, no, turns out that's good. Inflammation's the thing. So I love that shtick.
Welcome to nutrition.
Yeah. Really cracks me up. But I think there's a root of this inflammatory response that's causing all of these other things that people are experiencing. Or if you have something like a traumatic brain injury, the response to that. So I have a little highlight thing on my Instagram of people saying what they've experienced. So we run that play before we start working together, if someone's going to make changes. But for my clients and myself, we'll revisit the gut reset, maybe not all 7 days, sometimes modified after long bouts of travel. If they fell off our programming related to what we're doing from a diet perspective, if they're feeling under the weather, we can run it for a couple of days or run through the whole 7 again, or maybe modify it where we'll do the dense foods all 7 days. So there's different ways to make it work for you. I put it out and like, this is the most general way to do it, but you can definitely make it your own. The whole thing is paleo, like make it your own.
Love it. So before we go into the next superfood, and we have 4 more that we're going to cover here, let's give a little bit of background context. So classic sort of question, Mary, what do you do?
Yeah.
There's a lot of layers to it. Give the audience the layers.
I am a performance chef and specialist. I came to become this performance chef and specialist known as paleo chef from being sick most of my life. It's a common story in our industry. Not knowing what's wrong, being in the ER at least once a month, passing out in vomit from a migraine, and doctors being that young, they assume you're on drugs and they're like, what did you take? What did you take? And you're trying to explain to them that you just have this mystery illness no one can figure out. And it started in 2nd grade for me. And by the time I hit 4th or 5th grade, I decided like, oh, this is just my normal. So I made peace with it and just lived in pain every single day and did my best to not let it affect my livelihood. So if I was at a birthday party with a headache coming on, I'd be like, no, I'm going to stay until the very last minute. Or playing sports, I had coaches that understood. I would have limited eyesight if I have a migraine that day, hives, and we would find ways for me to still play the sports I want to play around that. And the hospital visits became more frequent as I got older. And there was, when I was 23 or 24, the final hospital visit where I was just so frustrated with misdiagnosis, medications that didn't make any sense, nothing that was really helping. And me asking, what is the root? What is causing the migraine? And had a sort of a meltdown in the hospital, ripping out the IV, marching out, like, I'm going to figure this out on my own. And it was surprising that it took that long, because I'm very clearly very assertive in other parts of my life, but was just relying on doctors to tell me what they thought was wrong versus doing that research. So stumbled upon a TED Talk by Dr. Terry Walls. We all love Dr. Terry Walls on minding your mitochondria. Remembering I did a whole report on the mitochondria in high school where my lab partner and I rewrote the words to a Beastie Boy song about ATP. Got to fight for your right to ATP. And being like, oh, all of this sort of made sense and was leading up to it. A technical paper I wrote in 7th grade about my idea of what autoimmune really means. And then sending out my own lab work. So all that research happening at the same time. And assuming I'm going to be sensitive to gluten in some way. So I started to remove gluten right off the bat. Test came back that I actually have celiac disease. And I was like, okay, this is more serious. I was stoked when I got that. I was like, amazing. I just stopped eating this and I feel better. Like, I didn't feel limited by, oh, what am I going to eat? Fruit, vegetables, proteins. I can still have scotch. Amazing. We're good. And so within a few months of changing my diet, all those symptoms went away. And I was in corporate technology, and my colleagues were noticing, you don't seem like you're in pain anymore. You're not sitting at your desk with sunglasses on. And I was always an overachiever because I'm actually a high school dropout and I went into tech at a really young age. So my peers are 10 and 15 years my senior. So I have to not just make quota, exceed quota to make sure that there's no reason to be like, let the young gun go. So them noticing, you're not having to muster through the day anymore to prove something, like you seem better. And I'm like, I am. It's this diet that I'm changing. And at the time, paleo is becoming a popular word. And so it was so much easier to say I'm following a paleo diet versus, I'm avoiding gluten, casein, and soy. And somebody asked me in that environment, would you put together a plan like this for me? And I was like, I could. Like, will you cook for me? And I'm like, I don't cook for people. I manage multi-million-dollar contracts, like being just so full of myself. And he's like, I'm willing to pay somebody this amount of money. And I was like, well, this is amazing. I live in San Francisco. You can make good money and still be poor. Heck yeah, I'll do this as a side hustle. It'll pay for my designer dresses, all those things. And so that was my first client. My second client, which came about a couple weeks later, I was getting my wisdom teeth removed because they were coiled and impacted and all this stuff. I had to get put under for it. And when I came to, the surgeon was like, oh, I'm so excited that you're going to be my private chef. So under the influence, I've already subconsciously decided I'm a private chef and pitched myself as a private performance chef. So those are my first two clients, and was trying to do both for a little period of time, just a few months. And my body was tired, breaking down, very much like, you can't do both. This is too much on you. So I had to choose one or the other. Had a serendipitous moment with a famous chef at the Ferry Building, and that interaction, which my friend had to point out to me because I was so in my head about what it is I wanted to do next. I quit the next day corporate and went all in on personalpaleochef.com. And then fast forward another month, Kamal Ravikant, a friend of mine, made a comment about why I don't have paleochef.com. And I'm like, oh, it's being taken. Somebody's using it. He's like, really? You should check it right now. I'm like, I told you, dude, it's used. Someone's using it. He's like, let's just check. It was going to auction that day. Had he not said that, I wouldn't have been able to win paleochef.com at auction. So I'm running that play.
By the way, Kamal's been on this podcast before.
Oh, amazing.
He's a great guy.
Amazing. I am sort of just like following the signs, and my friend Mark Grove says, it sounds like you're responding to the call. Although that's not what I'm aware that I'm doing. I'm just sort of going with what makes sense. I've been very much like, uncertainty is the greatest opportunity in life. And so that's sort of the call that I was following. And I was the only one that was doing what I was doing at the time. So when any athlete, any tech titan, any actor was Googling personal paleo chef, I was the only one showing up. So it was a combination of luck, timing, opportunity. But the reason why I'm still doing it 10 years later is follow through. So I got those clients early on because I was the only one doing it at the time, but I have the credibility I do because of how detailed I am. I'm still learning how to say this, but the talent that I possess to be able to still be doing that 10 years later. So that's how it started. That's how I got these incredible athletes over the last decade. I've been able to work with some of the greatest athletes in the world. I get to say now I have a championship under my belt. Go Warriors. I worked with a couple of players there. And I mean, just some of the most incredible humans in the world that buy into and trust me with their health in this way.
Beautiful. And in addition to the personal paleo work that you do with individual clients and athletes, you're also an entrepreneur. Let's just do a high level. We'll chat more about Phat Fudge and all the other stuff you're up to, but just explain a little bit about what led to the products that you created.
It's stress testing it. So you see things that work really well with your clients and you're like, this is really interesting. You share about it. And again, responding to the call, Phat Fudge is a great example of that. It's something I made for my clients because I don't love protein bars and I don't like goo packets and I needed something different for them. So I was making them Phat Fudge. I called it functional fudge at the time. And they're hitting PRs on the field, on the court. The musicians are like, wow, I had a great writing session today. And so I shared that recipe. That recipe went viral. And then people were taking pictures of that product in little baggies. I'd be like, you've got to turn this into a product. So I took $600 and went on Periscope, RIP, and was like, okay, there's 50 orders available online and I don't know what I'm doing, but if you buy them, I will figure out how to make into a product. And it sold out in an hour. And it wasn't that it sold out in an hour that was interesting. It was more so who bought it, who I didn't realize was following my work. And I was like, okay, don't fuck up now. These people are watching you. And so just repeated that process. And all future products that come out underneath the Phat Fudge house, it has to do with products that have been stress tested with performance athletes. This is not me sending an idea into a lab or asking formulators to make me a recipe. This is stuff that I've created on my own and have used with my athletes and my clients, and being like, there's actually legs behind this, and feeling so confident with putting it on the market because of that.
Yeah, tastes amazing. You brought a bunch over here. I've tried it for years. It's been in all the Erewhons and stores and all this stuff around here.
Erewhon was my first store when I was still hand packing it.
That's amazing.
Yeah,
and just so everybody's clear, we're talking about PHAT.
Yes.
Phat Fudge.
Yes.
And link in the show notes. We'll chat more about it in a second. Okay. We're going to pivot from your story, and I'm sure we're going to come back to it in a second. We're going to go into the next superfood. You know, you mentioned Terry Walls. She's been on this podcast twice. Love Terry. And something interesting for anybody that knows the Walls protocol, which is something that she developed for people that primarily have autoimmune and she had MS, is that she grew up vegetarian. And then as she started to understand that sometimes a diet that you think is going to be the best for you is not going to do the best for your health. And she had these autoimmune symptoms and progressive MS. And she created this version of her version of the paleo autoimmune diet, and felt like people would get better, but they weren't getting fully better. And she came on this podcast. She said there was 2 things she did and modified the diet that immediately it started working for a lot more people. The first one was working their way slowly up over a period of time, up to getting about 8 to 9 cups of vegetables a day. That was one. Number 2, which is what we're going to talk about next, is inclusion of organ meats. So let's talk about why organ meats, in particular liver, is number 2 on your list of top superfoods.
Goes back culturally. I've been eating liver since I was a child. It's one of my favorite foods, dishes
how
that my mom would make it.
Yeah, how do they make it?
Well, that's where I got tripped up was none of my friends grew up in California liked liver. And I'm like, liver's amazing. What are you talking about? And then I went to a friend's house for dinner. Her mom made liver, and it was liver and onions, and it was gray and it was bland. And I'm like, okay, now I understand why you don't like liver. In Egypt, we make it with coriander and cumin and cinnamon and green peppers and jalapeno, and it's feels so warm when you eat it. And again, just part of our diet since we're kids. And lo and behold, parents are right. It is something that is super nutrient dense. I don't have all the recommended daily values memorized, but it's in my ebook and I post about it all the time. They're like 1,000% of all these different necessary nutrients. And when I incorporate it in, now there are some people who have too much iron and definitely should avoid liver. This is not for those, because again, not everything is going to be great for everyone. But we did a project with Nike, the female running team. So these are women who are expending tons of calories. Some of them are bought into vegetarian, vegan lifestyle. And even though they are performing well, they have so many health issues. One's losing their hair. The other one hasn't had their period in a period of time. The other one can't put on weight. And I don't like to throw everything at someone right away, particularly for females. My first recommendation is usually let's incorporate liver, either eating it or capsules. It was insane, this project we did Nike. Within a few weeks, period returns for one. The other one is able to put on weight. The other one is like, I'm experiencing like a warmth in my body. And then after like 10 weeks, she was experiencing new growth of hair. Excuse me. Energy depletion across all clients usually goes up. And so it's something that, again, liver is so normal in other cultures and for whatever reason is not here, but it is another non-negotiable should your tests not show that we should be avoiding organ meat.
Now, today, when you make it, what are some of your favorite recipes, and are any of them available online if people want to use
Bangin'
them?
liver.
Bangin' liver.
Yeah.
All right, talk about it. What is it? How do you make it?
It's the way I described. So it's
Okay.
exactly the way we make it in Egypt, the way I had it growing up. I have had it on pop-up menus for my collaborations with different chefs. And you're putting liver on a menu in LA, and nobody returned it. And some people were skeptical and they loved it. I've maybe had one person in the last 10 years across not just clients or patrons of the pop-ups or even people who bought the ebook and did it. One person is like, I just can't get past the texture. Everyone else is like, I can't believe I love liver. Now, I'm sure somebody will prove me wrong at some point, be like, I hate it, can't get past it. But I think most foods that you don't like has to do, this is where the culinary side comes in, has to do with the preparation that goes
Totally.
into it. Some people who don't love chewing on liver will make it the way that my recipe calls for, and then blend it into a cream and like do pate with it. Just full of so much flavor.
I can say that that is, as somebody who grew up vegetarian and never really had liver, never had anything. And then when I got into the world of functional medicine and connecting with all these great doctors and seeing that, okay, this diet that I thought worked really well for me anymore doesn't feel like it's working well. When I first had liver, it was in the form of a pate.
Mm-hmm.
And it was actually at a restaurant just right down the street from over here where we're at in Los Angeles. And it's called Farm Shop. They have a chicken liver mousse on the menu. And it's a little bit of liver blended with some fruits and other stuff. And it's this beautiful pate that you can add to like a cracker or just eat with veggie sticks. And that was like a great introduction because it made me more excited to actually try it out in other forms.
Yeah, if you had liver and onions first get, you'd be like, hard pass.
Yeah. I feel for all the kids who are scarred for life on the liver and onions.
Yeah, I deal with that a lot. They're some sort of like really visceral childhood response to it. So I'll hide it. I'll make tacos or something.
In the spectrum of organ meats as a whole, is there any particular reason that you particularly put the spotlight on liver compared to some of the other organs that are there in organ meats?
The spotlight was there in the beginning, truthfully, just because it's something that was incorporated in my culture.
Background.
Yeah. And again, you find out, and when you do the research, it is something that is very nutrient dense. I also think it's more palatable. I grew up eating hearts and tripe and all of that, but those are harder to really get behind if you're not used to that texture. Even I'm like, I don't feel like eating heart today. It's a little too much work.
Do you ever have to be an advocate for something like liver from people who are from your cultural background and have forgotten about it? Like anybody in your family that you said, guys, liver was a part of how we grew up and I'm going to get you re-excited about it again, or no?
No, we're excited about it. When I go home to Egypt, you come over for one dinner, but your auntie is going to make food for a week for that one table because they want all your favorites. The thing of liver is huge because we all love it. It's no one needs to get excited about liver in my culture.
So a couple more clarifying questions for people, because even a lot of people who are listening to this podcast maybe haven't dived into liver. So what form of liver are you using? And do you use any particular services to ensure like quality, or you have like a butcher or something that you go to get the best quality?
I would recommend checking out your local farmer's market, getting to know your butcher that's there and understanding where it's coming from. Chicken liver, I lean towards because, again, it's the way I ate it growing up. I think it's a little more palatable. The texture is a little better. You can go beef or chicken, whatever your preference is. Beef is, I think, easier to mess up in the cooking process. So this is the culinary side. If you overcook it, it will become very tough and rubbery. Chicken liver, you can overcook it a little bit. There's a margin for error there. But yeah, the hitting up your local butcher or your farmer's market and find out the local farm that is servicing that area is usually what I recommend.
And any capsule recommendations, companies you like?
Paleo Valley, really like them. And then there's another one.
Organ Complex, I think it's named.
The Organ Complex. It's got a few other things in there that are really great for you. And then I can't remember the name now, but there's one out of New Zealand, I believe, that I really did like. I was looking at some of the other countries have better regulations around their farming practices.
Yeah. Beautiful. All right, let's go into the next one. And you actually also have a product that has this superfood ingredient that I just tried. It's fantastic. And that next one is tahini. So just explain to people, what is tahini? A lot of people actually surprisingly don't know what it is. And why is it on your top 5 list?
Tahini is ground sesame seeds. It has a really beautiful nutty flavoring to it. Could almost be like peanut butter. Almost. I don't have peanut butter. I haven't had peanut butter in like 11 years. So to me, it tastes like peanut butter because I don't remember what peanut butter tastes like. But tahini is everything in the Middle East. I don't know if it's everything in your culture too, because you do have halva, is what you guys call it. We call it halawa in mine.
It's not everything, but we have that Middle Eastern influence in some of the ingredients, often in desserts.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's used a little bit sparingly in our Indian culture.
So in the Middle East and Mediterranean culture, we use it for sweet and savory foods. So hummus has tahini in it, and our desserts have it. Our ice creams have it. We'll make dressings with it, different dips with it. So it's just something again that's always been in the fridge. I consider it a staple. And then doing what I do now, I'm like, oh, this is actually a really great vehicle when it comes to nutrient density. The way it's absorbed into the system for intake is really interesting too. Has a really great profile of magnesium, potassium, manganese, a little bit of iron. And it was the Phat Fudge is inspired by halawa or halva, which is a dessert. And I was eating it one day and thinking about how, oh, the ingredients are so clean. And then there's a different story of me doing some formulation for the Oracle sailing team and wasn't really happy with one of the final things I was trying to do for those athletes. And as I'm holding the halawa in my hand, thinking like, wait, if you modify these things, it can become a performance food. Separate from that, because original cacao is the first one. The spice ingredient in there was a combination of spices I was using for a coffee that I had posted, and I jokingly called it unicorn fuel. Be careful what you say on the internet, because they ran with it and it was voted like #2 coffee hack of that particular year because the recipe went viral. So I had a canister of unicorn dust on my counter, which was the pre-measured stuff just to easily make the coffees that I was doing for my clients. And so when I was making the halawa for myself, it's very temperamental, and I missed the timing of it. So I knew it wasn't going to crystallize like a natural tahini or natural halva. And so I dumped in all those ingredients of the unicorn dust in there and ended up making this OG formula for Phat Fudge. And the other ingredients are like maca and turmeric. The original one had some cayenne in there. And the ability for those other things to get absorbed better in combination with the tahini made it really interesting and powerful. Like, for example, coffee is in original, the equivalent of 1 coffee bean per packet, which is like 10 milligrams. Not very much. Some of my friends are like, oh my God, how much caffeine is in this? I feel so focused and like so much energy. And I'm like, interestingly enough, not very much, but the combination of that minimal effective dose with the maca, with the different elements of tahini has enabled you to be more focused. And so I really enjoy people who are skeptical and think it's just like a snack, and they take it and they're like, I'm noticing that I'm like locked in, or I hit a PR on the field, like I had more energy to keep going. So tahini.
So it's like a transportation vehicle.
Yeah.
Right. So it's like a great way. So separate from that, is there any other ways that you recommend that people incorporate tahini? Like the most common one that people use is probably like dressings. Is there other ways that you would incorporate into your recipes so people can get the benefits?
I mean, yeah, from a culinary perspective, I'm making dressings with it. I'm making dips with it. I'm making some healthier desserts with it. Sometimes I'm just spooning it or eating it with some fruit, putting it into a smoothie. It's so versatile. Like it, I don't know what the Middle East is without tahini, basically. But I think being more focused on it, like using it as a packet, or like even making your own version of Phat Fudge, like mixing it with some other things at home, having it on its own, and then becoming more aware of its effect on your body. Like I really want people to be aware of what's happening to their body when they're eating something like that, especially if they're trying to discover the benefits of it.
I love tahini as like, take a little bit of tahini, and we've had a lot of experts come on the podcast previously and talk about people having in their repertoire, like, a savory snack and not always sort of reaching for sweet, just to have as another option for them, especially when it comes to like metabolic health and other things, if they're trying to like, balance out their blood sugar and improve their results. So tahini is just one of those that you can quickly add in a bunch of little things, like just even chopped vegetables, like a little bit of tahini, mix it all together, kind of make your own, I don't even know what that would be called, but like,
it's a salad.
Yeah. But with tahini, kind of the glue.
Yeah.
As holding it all together.
I like that with tuna. I don't like mayo. I do not like mayo. I don't understand it. Every time I try to like it, my stomach turns a little bit, which is strange because I'm okay with aioli, but like mayo from the jar. So growing up, again, instead of mayo, tahini is in our tuna. So for me, tuna, tahini, a little lemon, a little cumin, and then I'll put it in like a red bell pepper, and specifically red because I like the combination of the flavor of the red bell pepper in contrast to the tahini, and the tuna is a snack of mine.
I love it. That's a recommendation for you right there. All right, let's go to the next one. Mushrooms, specifically like the medicinal mushrooms. So what are those and how do you incorporate them in what you have going on?
There's a few of them. The ones that I use most commonly are cordyceps. I'll use shiitake from a culinary perspective, and chaga, turkey tail, reishi are the ones that I really like to use, and they'll have different benefits. Four Sigmatic, Taro is a friend of mine, so he's introduced me to them a long time ago and got me incorporating them I have a pituitary adenoma, so I've been using them in higher dose combinations to help shrink that. And that's how I was introduced to them initially. And then before I introduced them to my clients' repertoire, doing more research. Like cordyceps, I love using for endurance and performance enhancing altitude prep. Reishi, which is in the Adapt Halva. Phat Fudge for regulating the nervous system, helping bring you down. Chaga for the immune system. Shiitake, I love. It's just so powerful for gut healing. Do you have any favorites on your end? I feel like you're in the same boat when it comes to functional mushrooms.
Yeah, mushrooms is one of those in the category. Love taro, love what they're up to. I, for whatever reason, again, this is where everybody just pays attention to their own body. I don't feel a draw to them. That doesn't mean that I have a reaction to them, but I just don't feel a draw. The culinary mushrooms, that are there, I like to cook with them and include them in, especially I get them from the farmer's market here, good sources.
Yeah, what are your favorite mushrooms?
I love the what do they call, the trumpet mushrooms, like the really thick ones.
Yeah.
I like to kind of cut those up like little pieces of almost like little tiny pieces of steak in a way.
Yeah.
And I like to pan fry them.
Yeah.
And incorporate them with like a nice like omelet or something like that. Love shiitake mushrooms as well.
You can make shiitake like a steak too. Get the really big heads.
Yep.
Score them as if you're scoring a steak, and lightly sear them with little coconut aminos, but for longer than you think on a lower heat, and it becomes really beefy. And the umami flavor on that, because of the coconut aminos, is really nice. I will do something similar with lion's mane mushroom, which is this beautiful mushroom. It's like this cream color, and I guess it looks a little hairy, but I'll do that slow like saute with that too. Yeah.
The thing that I do really, really love is that anytime I get a whiff of like my tonsils are acting up or like my throat is starting to get a little inflamed, I am a huge fan of the My Community spray by Paul Stamets and his company.
What's in it?
It's got all the mushrooms, every one that you just mentioned over there, minus the culinary ones.
Yeah.
And it's an incredible blend. And I just find it works really well with me. No financial ties or anything to the company, but that's kind of been one of my go-tos.
So you are drawn to it.
That's like when if I'm feeling like sick,
yeah.
I use it then. Yeah. It's not a thing that I use on a regular basis. I know there's fantastic products that are there, and I love them all. Like they all taste amazing.
Yeah.
But yeah.
Yeah, I think before somebody goes down the path of all these ingredients, maybe not liver because it's not very costly, but some of these ingredients, like the functional mushrooms, can be, pricey for an average household. It's removing other inflammatory foods, doing the best you can with what you have first, so you can more easily notice if any of these other things are beneficial to you. Because sometimes people get really excited and like, okay, I'm going to buy everything they talked about. But like, do it in stages. Like, remove some other things first. Get in a good place where you can actually be aware of how these things impact you, in the same way that you're very aware that spray helps you when you're feeling a little under the weather.
Absolutely. Couldn't agree more. Tell us some of the top 3 superfoods that are out there that you use regularly as part of your program and that you consume regularly, that people listening and watching today can take to supercharge their mitochondrial health and help them heal from disease and also lose weight and have more energy.
Okay, so I'm going to start with the things that are probably the easiest for people to add to their diet. And we could start with bone broth. Bone broth, which is an ancient food that our ancestral mothers and fathers have been eating again for thousands of generations. Tremendously nourishing, filled with collagen, amino acids, great source of minerals, easily absorbed. It will nourish your gut. It will allow you to absorb your other nutrition. If you don't have a healthy gut, you can't absorb any of the nutrition that your cells and your mitochondria need. So, the very first thing I want people to do is be sure that they have a healthy gut so they can absorb their nutrition. So I want all of my patients to have bone broth, and plus it's delicious.
And it's actually a really great source of protein. If you look at a lot of the bone broths that are out there, I know there's some brands that you're affiliated with. You look on the back, it's like 16 to 20 grams of protein for a serving. That's like incredible.
It's a lot of protein. It will not spike your blood sugar. It's easily absorbed. If you're having problems with belly pain, bloating, constipation, diarrhea, bone broth will still be very well tolerated. And it will improve your nutrition. It will improve your ability to digest and assimilate the rest of the food that you eat. So that's where I start all of my patients on bone broth.
And when you're starting people off on that, and we'll get to the other two foods that you recommend here in a second, when you're starting patients off on that, is it have as much as you want? Is it a certain amount of recommendation in a day?
Well, in general, people will be much more successful if you start slow and then gradually increase.
Anytime you're including something new, start slow.
Just start gradually. So you could start with half a cup and have it like a tea, and you just have it straight. If you want to get a little fancier, you could add a little coconut milk, some turmeric, and have basically golden milk, which I think is totally delicious. Or you could add any of the other spices that you enjoy: rosemary, thyme, basil. You could add literally any culinary spice that is part of your ethnic tradition.
I like putting in cumin, for example, and it's like you get all these fantastic polyphenols from all these great spices with this incredible base, which is bone broth.
Which is wonderful. So it's a lovely beverage. It's a great thing to start your morning with. You can sip on it during the day. Once you're comfortable with a half cup, then you could go to a cup. Then when that is comfortable, you could have a cup twice a day. You could also have it as a starter before your meals. And again, this is something that our grandmothers would have traditionally done. They would have served a cup of consommé or broth prior to the meals. That was a very traditional kind of food. And I have this wonderful cookbook from my grandmother in the 1930s and my great-grandmother from the 1800s. And both of those books talk about serving broth before your meals. That was absolutely a tradition.
I love that. One of the next foods we have on our list here that you put together for me is we have fiber. Now, when people look at fiber, sometimes they don't immediately think like, wow, how is that related to mitochondria? But tell us the connection between fiber and what kind of fiber you're talking about when it relates to gut health and mitochondria.
Well, I'm going to take us back to our beginnings when we were all single-cell organisms back in the ancient seas. And we were engulfed by the bigger organism, and had the first mitochondria. And we evolve into our multicellular organism. And we develop our first gut. Of course, that's millions and trillions of generations ago. But when we evolved that first gut, we brought with us the microbes that were living in the sea. And those microbes would help us digest our food. They would make some vitamins. They would eat the food that we're eating and make their own microbial metabolites that get into our bloodstream and help us run the chemistry of life. We have a very intimate relationship with those ancient microbes. They have evolved right along with us. We have a very cooperative, collaborative relationship with them. And again, if I'm going to have good health, I have to be able to assimilate the nutrition and to digest the nutrition. That means I need to have healthy microbes. My microbes, again, for millions of generations, humans were eating about 150 grams of fiber every day. Now we're eating like less than 15 grams of fiber a day. We're starving our friends. We're starving those ancient microbes that co-evolved with us over these millions of years. We need more fiber so we can fertilize our good friends, so we have a healthy gut. Because if I'm going to nourish my cells and my mitochondria, my gut needs to work well. So I need the bone broth, I need more fiber so my gut can work well and I can absorb the rest of the nutrition that I need.
Great. And I have a bunch of questions about fiber because a lot of people start to include more fiber. They have challenges. They notice that their gut can't handle it. We'll come back to that in a little bit. So we'll put a little pin in that. There's so many things that you talk about. I'm like, man, we could talk about a whole,
Yes.
2-3 episodes about that, but we'll come back to fiber. The last one on the list of the top 3 foods that support mitochondrial health is a food that we've talked about before. But again, I don't know if people understand how important this food is, especially when it comes to your protocol, and that's organ meat. What does organ meat have to do with mitochondrial health?
Our organs, particularly heart, tongue, liver, gizzards, are really great sources of fat-soluble vitamins, vitamin A, pre-made retinol. If it's a grass-fed, grass-finished animal, it's going to have vitamin K. It will have a lot of B vitamins. It will have coenzyme Q, creatine, carnitine, lipoic acid. So all of these, and it will also have easily absorbed potassium, easily absorbed sodium, easily absorbed magnesium. And depending on the heart also has easily absorbed calcium. These nutrients are important cofactors for how the mitochondria function. Our ancestors would have prized the eyes, the brains, the heart, the liver. And if there was plenty of, the hunt was successful, they might have left the muscle meat behind for the hyenas and the jackals, but they would have taken the organ meat back to camp.
You even notice that animals in the wild also kind of first go for the organ systems.
Absolutely.
They're not first going for that. I was watching a little Facebook documentary on a gentleman in Africa who has a sanctuary for lions. And one of the things that he was talking about is that he noticed that over a period of time, because they are running this sanctuary, they were primarily just feeding the lions muscle meat. All the lions started to develop these nutritional deficiencies. They're deficient in vitamin A. They're deficient in all these different nutrients. And they only found out because a vet came and looked at them and said, are you giving them organ meats or at least supplemental nutrients that are put into the muscle meat? And they said, no, we're just giving them regular muscle meat. He said, that's why they're nutrient deficient. And that's why their hair is falling out. And that's why they don't seem like their eye health is as good. So even all animals, but I know that the idea of regularly including organ meats into our diet is tough for a lot of people, especially for people who are vegan or vegetarian. And I know you came from a vegetarian background. 20 years you were vegan, vegetarian. I also grew up vegetarian and became vegan for 6 years. So we'll talk more about organ meat a little bit later. And obviously people are free to respect any sort of tradition or philosophy they follow with food, but we don't want to not bring up the benefits of something so crucial.
Retinol. It's very important. People know that the deeply pigmented vegetables have all sorts of carotenoids in them, polyphenols, which are fabulously good for us. But they are not the pre-made vitamin A, retinol. And we need retinol for our eyes. We need retinol for proper function and division of our cells. We need retinol in our mitochondria. And depending on your genetics, you'll either be very efficient at converting carotenoids beta carotene into retinol, or you'll be relatively inefficient. And I tell my folks who have complex chronic disease states that they're more likely to be inefficient in that they would benefit from having some pre-made retinol. And that if they eat liver, once a week, they'll get their retinol. But I also remind them, because I have plenty of carnivore friends who eat only animal products, and they were telling their followers to have a pound of liver every day. And I have to remind them that retinol does have a toxic effect and a problem if you're, like many of our nutritional compounds. If you get too high, they can be deleterious. If you're too low, they'll have a disease state. If your retinol is too high, you can end up with fibrosis of the liver, so you have cirrhosis. You end up with fibrosis of the lungs, with pulmonary fibrosis. You can have fibrosis of the heart. And the problem is you don't recognize that until the disease is fairly advanced. You've now stored a lot of retinol in your fat, and now you've got a very difficult problem to treat.
So there's this gentleman who's like pretty popular on social media, and a lot of young people are like following him, and he's kind of had a little bit of controversy that's there, infamous, I guess you would say. His name is the Liver King, and he's known for having liver every single day. And if you were the doctor for the Liver King, you say, hey, listen,
this is going to be a problem.
This is going to be a problem. Too much of something that might be good at a lower dose that's there can actually have detrimental impact.
Yeah, and he won't know until the disease is really quite advanced.
Because it's very difficult to use our modern tests to see how far things have developed.
So if you want to know your vitamin A stores accurately, it's a very sophisticated test. The blood levels don't tell you what's stored in your fat. So one would take a radioactive isotope, so radiolabel retinol, inject you in it, and then let that equalize, and then scan you. It's a very sophisticated test. It's only done in a few research labs, and the result is clinically, people don't know how to diagnose vitamin A toxicity until you're sort of at the end stage disease. And part of the problem is the early deaths due to vitamin A toxicity when you take an overwhelming dose of vitamin A, as in polar bear liver, that can kill you acutely. It's hard to do. It can occasionally happen. But the problem with vitamin A is not the acute poisoning. It's the slow poisoning from overload. So I want everyone to take vitamin A. I want you to have liver once a week, like 6 to 8 ounces, but not a pound every day. That will come back to bite you.
You can't talk about mitochondrial health and the benefits of it without analyzing and looking at our modern day society and looking at the things that are damaging it, because our mitochondria are quite sensitive. So on the topic of foods, and then we'll go into other lifestyle factors that you've written about a lot, like sun exposure, light exposure, exercise. But first, let's go to food. Diagnose sort of our modern day society. What are some of the top foods? Let's pick 3, if you can, at least, that are damaging our mitochondrial health.
We, in an effort to deal with hunger, many, many years ago, we created this program of subsidizing corn, soybean, and wheat so we could generate more calories, which then Big Food used to make a lot of processed foods out of the sugar products, the soybean products, the wheat products. And so now we have this food industry that delivers a lot of calories that have been stripped of vitamins, minerals, polyphenols. And if we did a measurement with carbon labeling to say, how much of your carbon is due to corn or soybeans or wheat, it's a stunning amount. And we should not be surprised, because so much of our diet is derived from a a corn product, a wheat product, or a soybean product.
And when you're saying about the carbon, you're not talking about the environment. You're talking about like literally if we could do an analysis of what your cells are made up of, we'd see that people are made up of a lot of these things that are related
came
to
out
that.
of corn, soybeans, and wheat. Shocking, disturbing. We should be being made up of carbon that came from a wide variety of plants. We should be made up of amino acids that came from a wide variety of sources, not just one animal. Our ancestors, again, our ancestral mothers and fathers, had amazing diversity of their food sources, their protein sources, their fat sources, their carbohydrate sources. And we have a very narrow range for our fat sources, our protein sources, and our carbon sources, to our detriment.
Terrible. So when you look out there and you look at soy, corn, and then what was the other one that you mentioned? Wheat. What are some of the other derivative products that are coming from that? For example, some people say we should be a little bit worried about seed oils. Other people say that no, seed oils are kind of fine and it's okay to have them in your diet. What's your take on seed oils like canola oil and corn oil and a lot of these oils that are being derived from these top foods that are being consumed in America especially?
Well, if I look at the ideal ratio of omega-6 fats to omega-3 fats, the basic science would tell me that a ratio of 4:1 has the healthiest cell membrane, has the lowest incidence of autoimmunity, has the best mood, lowest incidence of heart disease. If we have diets that are high in all these seed oils, processed foods, then that ratio, instead of being 4:1, is 15:1, 20:1, 30:1, 45:1. And that leads to poorly functioning cell membranes. It leads to more autoimmunity, leads to more metabolic syndrome, leads to more depression and anxiety. So simply for getting the ratios correct, I want to get rid of all of those seed oils. I'd much rather people are using monosaturated fats, lard, tallow. Our ancestral mothers and fathers, the kinds of fats that we were using were rendered animal fats. Then we discovered olives and we had olive oil. The use of these refined oils, they're refined. They're not cold pressed oils. They're refined using solvents. So there are solvents left in those oils. You try to reduce the solvents. You can't get rid of the hexane entirely. And when you take these seed oils and you heat them over 180 degrees, then you're going to take some of those double bonds and move them into the trans position. And when they're in the trans position, when they get incorporated into my cell membrane, they'll make my cell membranes less effective. When I was in medical school, we were very gung-ho on margarine, hydrogenated fats. That was going to be superior to butter. But we now know those trans fats mean the cell membranes are less effective. If your cell membrane is less effective, you can't get signals into the cell, out of the cell. The cells are not working very well. You have a higher rate of cancer. You have a higher rate of heart disease. You have a higher rate of anxiety, depression, a higher rate of metabolic syndrome.
That's great. So it's really paying attention to that ratio. I did a test many years ago. It was one of the reasons that at the time, for me, again, I want people to do whatever they want, stopped being vegan, is I took this test called the Omega Quant. I'm not affiliated with them, but I like it because it's an easy way. It's an at-home test. It's $100. I recommend it to all my friends. You get a test at home and you can prick your finger and it'll send it back in and they'll tell you your omega-3 to omega-6 ratio. And my ratio was really inverted because I was eating a very processed vegan diet.
Yeah, and certainly I respect that there are people who are vegan, vegetarian for their spiritual beliefs, and they're deeply committed to them. And if you're doing that for your spiritual beliefs, Then we need to do some testing so I can detect what metabolic abnormalities we have, and we can address them. I also point out that when you lean into all this processed vegan food and you lean into all this soy-based products, you are actually contributing to deforestation because Brazil, a lot of the drive to deforest Brazil is to grow soybeans. If instead of trying to grow soybeans on marginal lands, we were pasturing that as part of regenerative farming, we would have less deforestation and you'd have a healthier production of protein.
So you talked about wheat, soy, corn. We talked about seed oils. Let's talk about another one. What is the role of sugar when it comes to our mitochondrial health? Why do so many people talk about sugar and mitochondria and some of the damaging impacts that sugar can have?
So our mitochondria can burn sugar. They can burn amino acids. They can burn fats. And people have been mistaken to think that when I'm exhausted, I'm going to take sugar or caffeine to deal with that fatigue. And when we take a lot of sugar, it stimulates our dopamine. We get a lot of pleasure. I get a hit. I'm taking processed foods. I'm going to get a lot of stimulants that are added to the food to create that craving and the withdrawal. However, that drives insulin resistance. That drives diabetes, and that in the end, that's going to create more problems with my mitochondria. I'll be more likely to have small, less effective mitochondria. If I have less insulin resistance, so more insulin sensitivity, because I have a lower glycemic index diet, so I'm eating more protein, more fat, I'm more likely to have large, robust, healthier mitochondria.
So one of the things I mentioned earlier is that it's not just diet that can both help and harm mitochondria. It's also our lifestyle factors. For you, you say, and we're going to break down your journey in a second for those that aren't familiar, haven't heard our first two episodes, but you say like fixing your mitochondria and when you stopped poisoning them was central to you getting better. So talk to us more about those other factors separate from food that both help and hurt mitochondria.
You know, probably for many of the listeners, you are poisoning your mitochondria. You don't know that, but you probably are. I'd spent far too many years poisoning my mitochondria. First, I grew up on a farm, and we used pesticides, herbicides as part of the agricultural chemicals. And so all of those pesticides, insecticides are toxic to mitochondria. In addition, we had our own private well, and 80% of the farm wells, private wells in Iowa, are contaminated with atrazine, which is a pesticide that has been banned for decades in Europe because of its toxic effects on mitochondria. So, little kid, I'm accidentally damaging my mitochondria from the beginning. Then I had to take a bunch of antibiotics very early in life because of tonsillitis and strep throat. Really great. I never had to have valvular heart disease, so I'm thrilled I got those antibiotics. But recurrent antibiotics, remember I said earlier, our mitochondria are ancient bacteria. So antibiotics, particularly if you have to take them long term, can be stressful for your mitochondria. Then the next problem that I had is I'm an artist. So I started oil painting when I was in high school. And I have a degree in oil painting and also did metallurgy. So now I'm exposed to mercury, lead, cadmium. And I had years of eating lots and lots of rice. So let's throw in arsenic. And so all of those things poison the enzymes that my mitochondria use. So, that's a problem. And I got into medical school. I am thrilled to be doing gross anatomy. And which is, something every artist longs to do, is get to go dissect cadavers. So I go back to the lab, unwrap the cadavers, and I have these beautiful notebooks of all these cadaver drawings that I did. So I probably have 3 to 4 times the amount of formaldehyde exposure of my classmates, because I was so thrilled to be doing all these drawings, which again was stressful for my mitochondria.
You really went for the whole toxic soup, huh? You were trying to see how many points you could score up in that whole category.
And so in my undergraduate years, I had lots of energy. I was an athlete. I did full contact taekwondo. I competed nationally in 1978 before entering medical school. I was in the Pan American Trials. I was a real kick-ass sort of girl. During medical school, I started having less and less energy. I could not be quite as strong. And I think it was the effect of all of that damage that had been accumulating on my mitochondria.
And can I pause you for just a moment? What are these different toxins actually doing? Do they make it harder for the mitochondria to do their job? Do they literally interact with the mitochondria, and then the mitochondria that are exposed to them die off? Like, what are the series of things that are happening?
Sure. So these various compounds, minerals, are really important cofactors for the enzymes that are used in the Krebs cycle.
And could you break down the Krebs cycle? Because for a lot of people, that'll be new. What happens in the Krebs cycle?
So when we, in the cell, we can take glucose and make ATP. If you do it in the cytoplasm, we're not very good at that. But you can, and you do it without oxygen, you can make 2 ATP if you do it in the cytoplasm.
Which is central for energy and powering everything in our body.
And ATP is adenosine triphosphate. Our cells will use that ATP to drive all the other biochemical reactions that happen in life. Because in order for the chemical reactions to happen in life, there's usually a enzyme that's facilitated by a vitamin and a mineral cofactor. And then you need to nudge it a little bit. You use the ATP to give it that nudge so the reaction can happen. And we use that to basically to make the stuff that we have to make to stay alive. And life is really a series of self-controlled chemical reactions that allow us to grow and ultimately to reproduce.
Beautiful.
Very, very important stuff. Then, so in the cytoplasm, you can take a glucose molecule, no oxygen. I can make 2 ATP. If I have oxygen and I can put the glucose through the Krebs cycle, through a series of steps that will be facilitated by the enzymes that exist in the mitochondria, that are in the cell membranes of the mitochondria, then we can get up to 38 ATP per glucose molecule. So there's a big difference between 2 and 38. For that to happen, you need to have lots of B vitamins. You need zinc, magnesium. We can also facilitate this with the creatine, carnitine, coenzyme Q, riboflavin, niacin. These are molecules that are important to either making the enzymes in that pathway or shuttling in the fat or the glucose or the amino acid into the mitochondria. Where these heavy metals, lead, mercury, cadmium, arsenic, they compete with the nutritional minerals, and so the zinc and magnesium can't do their job, and the heavy metals are displacing them.
And in your instance, you were getting some exposed to those, you were saying like oil painting and being in medical school, but people don't have to be an artist or be a doctor to do that. It's often that many of those things are found in even a lot of the commercial cosmetics. Like if you're not buying from cleaner brands, or if you're using a lot of fragrances, or if you're being exposed to some of the things that you mentioned before, even just a high dosage of pesticides regularly that you're being exposed to in your diet, or eating foods that have a large concentration of pesticides. So that is one of the ways that most people that are listening today are going to be exposed.
Yeah, most of you are being exposed because it's in our water, it's in our food supply. Depending on where you're getting your food, it will be in the food supply and in the water. Mercury is a byproduct of burning coal. And the coal plants that are being burned in China get into the air, come down in the rain across the Pacific and across the United States. So depending on the foods that you're eating, you will be at risk of some heavy metals. And our various regulations on controlling the effluents that go into our air, into our water, those regulations fluctuate according to government policy. And more recently, some of these regulations have been relaxed. And so I know in Iowa, the quality of the water has sharply reduced in the last 20 years. It's very, very concerning. We can also look at the number of wildflowers. The wildflowers and the quality of air globally in here in the United States has been impacted by the amount of wildfires that are occurring.
And just the deteriorating infrastructure, piping and other things that have had decades of usage and have not been replaced. And so you have lead exposure that's coming because the pipings have been,
it's not just Flint.
Yeah.
We're painfully aware of Flint, but the lead in the water system is much larger than Flint.
Which is why, one of the best things that somebody could do today is just get a good quality water filter at home, like a reverse osmosis or something like that.
Yeah, and I talk to my patients that we can start with just a pitcher that has a filtration system that you pour your water through in the pitcher. That's very inexpensive. You can put it on your tap. You can get it under the sink with a reverse osmosis. There are also whole house water filtration systems. But I think everyone should be having filtered water.
I had a kind of a mentor figure in my life many years ago who had this great phrase. He said, either you get a filter or you become the filter. And I think that's important for people to realize, is that it's going to get filtered one way or another, but you don't want it to be your body filtering it out. You might as well have something else, like a good quality water filter.
And let me point out, Drew, that we also breathe a lot of air. And now that we have been tuned in to make our homes tighter, so they're more energy efficient, we're more likely to have poor air quality indoors because of the synthetic compounds that are used in manufacturing for our homes, for our offices, because of the synthetic carpets, the synthetic building materials.
It's a problem. All those parts per million get into the air. We breathe them in. It affects cognition. It affects our mitochondrial health. It gunks up our lungs.
As you said, it's going to get filtered. Are you going to be the filter, or are we going to filter first? And so again, I talk to my patients that, again, this depends on your circumstances. You can get filters that are good for your room or for your apartment, or if you own your own home and you have a heating air conditioning unit, you can get a filtration system that you can put on your heating air conditioning unit. That's what I've done. I have the filter replaced twice a year. And it's always very impressive, the amount of stuff that gets filtered out that the filter took out as opposed to my lungs.
It's so true. Even in the studio, there was a period of time when we were first moving in, we hadn't transported over our filters from our old studio. And I remember recording with the guest, and I just felt like it was harder. I just felt like I wasn't as sharp. I felt like I wasn't fully there. And I wasn't even thinking it was the filter. Then the next week we finally brought over the filters and we got them, changed them out, turned them back on. We used something called Air Doctor. We're a big fan of it. And that that day, again, could be placebo, could be this. There's a lot of things and factors that are there, but that's my N of one experience. We turned on the filters and it's a pretty high quality one. Not to mention the fact that we just had built this studio out. So there's a lot of volatile compounds in the air, even though we use low VOC paint, even though we use natural rugs and other stuff. Anytime you buy something new, there's always going to be waste product that's generated in the air.
Absolutely.
Off-gassing, as you had mentioned. And so a filter has been super beneficial in that. So let's zoom out a little bit more. You were just talking about not poisoning our mitochondria, and we're going to come to your story. I keep on teasing it. We're going to come to your story in a second. Were there other things, lifestyle factors, separate from environmental toxins and that? How about exercise, sleep, other things? What did those look like on your journey while you were headed towards your body literally breaking down and you ultimately ending up in a wheelchair?
So, early in my life, I'm a farm kid. Plenty of exercise, lots of sun, lots of vitamin D. Go off to college. I'm not outside, but I need to exercise. So I get into long distance running. I get into martial arts. So that exercise had a fair amount of high intensity interval workout, which is really great for your mitochondria. If you do a high intensity interval workout, you'll stimulate your mitochondria to consolidate themselves so they're a bit larger.
Is that called mitochondria uncoupling? Is that process?
Well, mitochondrial fusion.
Fusion. Okay, got it.
And then they will also, you'll make more of them. So they're bigger, stronger, healthier. That is really good.
And that's kind of like the beneficial stress that's there. It's like,
the beneficial stress.
We need to rise to the occasion. And you know what? These mitochondria are not as strong because maybe they've been damaged or they haven't been taken care of. So we just need to recycle them, and then
we'll clean out the old ones. We will repackage them into bigger, larger, and then we'll make more of them. So it is great. But if you do it a little too hard, then that can become a problem. And so again, I can sort of think about. I like to push myself, and I probably push myself much too hard. I was running 85 to 100 miles a week.
Wow.
And I was doing that my first year of medical school. And then I couldn't do it my second year of medical school. In retrospect, I think I did not give myself recovery time. And so HIIT is really good. High intensity interval training is great, but you have to be careful that you're giving yourself sufficient recovery time. If you do not, you will begin to break down your mitochondria, and they won't be big, fat, and so plentiful. And you'll begin to feel like I'm losing ground.
They'll be spread too thin.
Literally. Yes,
wow.
Absolutely.
Amazing. Again, just the idea, the next question I want to ask you goes right into this, which is that why is it that modern medicine, and going back to your days of learning about mitochondria back in medical school, how is it that we so overlook the importance that mitochondria play with health?
So biochemistry, we memorize all those equations, cellular physiology, we memorize all of that stuff. What's sort of interesting, we never got taught this really basic concept. The food we eat becomes the cells we're going to have and the body we're going to have. So if you want a high quality cell and a high quality body, you really have to have high quality inputs. Shocking. Now, I mentioned that I'm a farm kid. We certainly understood if you wanted to have a high quality championship cow or pig or horse, you took very much interest into making sure you had high quality rations. It is shocking that there was nothing. We were taught nothing about nutrition.
It's almost like that phrase, I don't know who discovered water, but it wasn't a fish, right? It probably wasn't a fish. It was so obvious and in front of us, but it was overlooked, probably and majorly connected to the idea of modernity, right? And modern progress, and the idea of, as you mentioned, after the big world wars, trying to feed people and the depression and just thinking it's all about calories in and calories out. And this is the modernization, and we've figured it out. We've hacked it as humanity.
And with World War I and then World War II, we saw how powerful antibiotics were at taking people who were on the cusp of death from their overwhelming infection. And we could give them just a little bit of penicillin, a little bit of a sulfa antibiotic, and kill the microorganisms, and the person would be restored to health. And so we thought that these other chronic disease states would find a magic drug that was just as powerful. And the NIH, the National Institutes for Health, was very interested in understanding physiology, and that by understanding physiology and molecular pathways, we would be able to design these perfect drugs that would fix all of our chronic disease states.
We did it before with antibiotics. We're going to do it again for every next thing that comes.
For every other chronic disease. And at that same time, after World War II, there's this dramatic increase in the rates of non-infectious chronic disease states. These are the non-communicable diseases. So there's a 400% increase, so fourfold increase in the rates of allergy and asthma, type 1 diabetes, inflammatory bowel disease, rheumatoid arthritis, multiple sclerosis, autism. I don't know what the rates are for anxiety, depression, mental health. I believe that's even steeper than the fourfold that we see for these other autoimmune diseases.
It's truly a toxic soup that all added up together probably came from good intentions and then was kept alive through just profiteering, right? Like profit motives, not a grand conspiracy. Most things that seem like a grand conspiracy can be simply chalked up. There's actually a quote by Naval Ravikant. He's like, most things that we look at that are a big conspiracy to suppress the population or do this or that are really just two things. Number one, a general sense of incompetence, like by the system often,
correct,
right? The system just wasn't paying attention to it. And the second one is profit. Who doesn't like to make money? And they're not thinking that this is contributing to poor health. So they keep that cycle going in the case of, these big processed foods companies.
Well, the food tastes good. And
the food tastes good too. That's an important point.
It tastes good. It's cheap. The big food, which, by the way, big tobacco bought up big food, and they learned that we will hire the best PhD food scientists, and we will pay them great money to help design chemicals that will be generally regarded as safe, that we could add to the food to make the food even tastier, so the consumer will buy more of that, and that the consumer will feel uncomfortable if they're not consuming that food, so that they will crave it. And then they discover that, if we begin marketing to the children, we could get the children to ask their parents to get more of these food items. And then when the children grow up to be adults, they will perpetuate consuming these foods. So we now have, children. If you look at the fast food consumption in the United States, on any given day, 37% of us are having fast food. And the younger you are, the more fast food you're having. It's 50% if you're under the age of 24. And you're likely to have all of your meals be fast food. If you do cook at home, you're probably eating a boxed meal that's already been prepared by someone else. You just open it up, put it in a pan, and warm it up. Our children and many of our young adults, and even many of our old adults, have forgotten how to meal plan, how to shop, how to cook using ingredients. If they cook, they're simply opening a jar or a box of processed food that someone else has already made.
People that have higher levels of omega-3s in their blood are less likely to die an earlier death. To me, that's mind-blowing. I'd love for you to expand on that.
Sure. Great to be on your show. Thanks for the invitation. That particular finding, we were part of a large collaboration of a bunch of we call cohort studies. A cohort is just a group of people that gets recruited in a certain area, like in Boston or in London or whatever. And the investigators will draw blood samples at the beginning of the study, and then they just keep in touch with these people over the years to see how they do, what the diseases they develop. And then we look backwards and we look at omega-3 levels in the blood from when they started the study and see what the diseases happened, who died, who didn't die, things like that. So the paper you're talking about, we looked at omega-3 levels in something like 150,000 people, 18 different cohorts, and we put it all together and we looked at the people at the highest omega-3 levels, the highest 20% versus the lowest 20%. And those that had the highest 20% were like 10 to 15% less likely to die during that period of time that we followed them up. Obviously you wait long enough, everybody dies. Okay. So but
just so everybody's clear.
Just to be clear on that. Right. We are not, this is not immortality we're talking about, but it does seem to make you live, or higher omega-3 is associated. I have to be careful. I'm not saying the effect of omega-3 is to make you live longer, because we haven't done that intervention study, supplementation study, and nobody ever will do that study. But all the evidence is pointing to the association between high omega-3 and longer life, healthier life, better health span, as you say.
That study is the tip of the iceberg, but there's so much more that's there. And in your 40 years of working on this, 40 years plus now, right? 40 years plus now doing this research, 340 plus papers on omega-3s. Today's interview is really designed to highlight and champion this research to help people understand what I feel I understand, but I want everybody to understand. And you tell me if this is factually correct in the way that I understand it, that when it comes to the most studied nutrients that are out there and their connection with actually moving the needle in improving our health, omega-3 is in the top 3 or 4 of those nutrients. Is that correct?
That is definitely correct. Yeah, I think if we look at the top nutrients that have scientific research papers published on them, you got vitamin D, folic acid, and omega-3. And omega-3 has only been on the radar since the late 70s. And I'm talking about all the history of medical publications, okay, back into the 1800s. Vitamin D has been known for many, many more years. So has folic acid. And folic acid got a lot of interest, of course, when it was figured out that it related to birth defects. In any event, omega-3 has gotten a lot of attention, and it's one of the top 3, but one of the top 5 molecules in, add aspirin, add prednisone, add other medicines, and how much research they've had. Penicillin, it's one of the top 5 or 10 molecules that's been studied in the history of medicine.
So therefore, would it be fair to say that if you care about your health, again, this is based on the literature, there's not the causality, there's the association that's there. If you care to live to as long as your genetic potential is designed for, and not just live long, but live a healthy life, you want to seriously be paying attention to omega-3s in the form of getting it regularly in your diet through fish, and then also supplementation. Is that a fair statement?
That's a fair statement. That's the reality, right? Fish is a great way to do it. You got to pick the right fish. You got to be consistent with it, but it's very doable. But most people will not be doing it, so they'll take supplements, and dietary supplements of omega-3, EPA, DHA are definitely fine for increasing your blood levels and your tissue levels.
Well, we're going to get into all the details in this interview, but again, just to really drive the message home, I want to bring up another study that you guys were a part of, looking at some of this data. And this is something that I wrote about last week in my newsletter. And when I was telling friends about this, their minds literally were blown because they could not imagine how this was possible. You're going to explain to us what might be going on. So
I'm glad I'm sitting down.
I feel like I'm the unofficial hype person for omega-3 and your research. So that's how excited I am. Okay.
Keep it going.
So omega-3 is so powerful that even smokers who had the highest level of omega-3 index were actually more protected than non-smokers who had the lowest level of omega-3s in their blood work. Is that accurate? And can you explain what the heck is going on?
Yeah. Okay. So, right, to back up, that's a study we did as part of what's called the Framingham study. It's a big, very famous cohort that a lot of research has been done in. And we looked at the omega-3 levels in the blood of these people. And then we looked at how long they lived, from the time we screened them. I think they're about 65 years old when we screened them, when we measured their omega-3 levels. And then we followed them up for about 10 or 12 years. So between, say, 65 and 75. Some people died, some people didn't, right? Some people were smokers, some people weren't smokers. And we did all the statistics and found that the people who lived the longest were non-smokers and had the highest omega-3 levels. Okay. And contra that, the people who died the soonest, most likely to die, were smokers and those with the lowest omega-3. And in the middle, I think is the area you're kind of talking about, if you had high omega-3 and were a smoker, you had about the same risk of death as if you were a low omega-3 and non-smoker. It's kind of in the middle. So they were roughly equivalent in a way in terms of risk prediction. I kind of be careful with this. I don't, because some people will take this and say, okay, all I got to do is eat more fish, take some fish oil pills, and then the smoking I'm doing right now is not going to bother me. I wouldn't go that far, but we all have some sense of how much smoking increases your risk for bad outcomes. And I just want to get people to realize that the omega-3 level is kind of in the same category. It's on the other side, of course, or I guess you'd say a low omega-3 is kind of like being a smoker in terms of your risk. But fair enough. That's good way to explain it.
That's fair enough. And, you're a researcher, you work with the team that's there, but you're also a human being. When you came across these findings, was there a party that was like, no freaking way? Is this the actual truth? Was there some party that literally, like, I keep on using the word mind blown, but this is actually where I feel it's so supposed to be used? Was your mind blown in these findings?
It was. I mean, when I first saw that graph come back from our biostatistics people and showed the lines, the death lines, so to speak, and showing that the omega-3s basically were basically canceled out the smoking in terms of effect on, I was amazed too, but they said, trust us. So I trust them. But it's a pretty cool finding.
It's pretty cool finding. And we're just beginning to peel back the layers of the onion of how powerful omega-3s are. Let's keep the train going a little bit. You sent me some fantastic studies. And I feel like a big part of my job as a podcast host, who's not an expert in health, but is trying to highlight the people who are, like yourself and your team, is that half of my job is just helping people understand the problem and the potential in the first place. Then we can talk about what to do about it, right? But if you don't get how bad the problem is, or if you don't understand the true potential, if I tell you, or you tell the audience rather, what to do, how much supplements to take, how much fish they should be eating, which we're going to be covering that, it comes in this year, you're excited about it for a day, excited about it for a month, you forget about it, and then people move on with their lives. That's why we're taking our time to really tease this out so that people understand. I want to talk about mental health and brain health for a second. I had mentioned to you that I owe so much to your work because growing up being vegetarian and then being vegan for a while and not realizing that I was significantly low in omega-3s, the light bulb moment that I had was doing an omega quant. There was a practitioner and a friend who said, hey, you've been vegan for a little while. Why don't we test you and see, or you could even order this test yourself, which I have the link below. People can go to Omega Quant website. And I did this and it came back and there's this whole phrase that says, test, don't guess. And I was guessing that everything was good, but mentally I wasn't feeling as sharp. I was feeling a little bit of what I would call depressive episodes, even though I wasn't diagnosed. And my omega-3 levels came back significantly low. What do we know about omega-3s and depression or mood?
Yeah. it's a great story. And I assume if you were a typical vegan, you were below our like 4% in that red zone. And that's not a good place to be. What do we know about omega-3 and depression and anxiety? And this is, there's been quite a bit of research in the area. And it's mixed. And part of the blessing, the mixed blessing of having so many studies done on omega-3 is that some of them turn out like you think they are. Some of them don't really find a relationship or an effect. Hardly ever is there a bad outcome, so to speak. So it's either positive or neutral. But in the area of depression, supplementation studies have shown some benefits on increasing or rather decreasing symptomatology of depression. Those studies can never be really very long. They're not years long, which is what you'd really want. For that kind of perspective, we look at blood levels as blood levels predicting risk for developing dementia, depression. And those typically show higher levels of omega-3 associated with lower risk for developing depression. Okay, that makes sense too. There's been some evidence that EPA might be a little better for depression than DHA, the two long chain omega-3s in fish. So maybe we could get into that if you want to, but there's certainly a link. I mean, is the omega-3 supplementation going to do just as well as an antidepressant? Yeah, maybe not. But we're talking about nutrition here. We're not talking about, and usually it helps with the drug, taking them together. But there's strong evidence. Like you said, I'm a scientist, and I try not to get too emotionally excited or I don't want to speak beyond the data. So I see, because I'm aware of studies where they didn't see an effect of omega-3, and of course studies that do see an effect. So I have to be a little balanced. The thing is with omega-3, and this goes across all of our discussions, is they are completely safe. Completely safe. There is no downside to taking omega-3s, and there's lots and lots and lots of potential upsides. Some strongly confirmed, some strongly suggested. But when I always look at risk-benefit ratios to anything you do in life, if the risk is virtually zero and the benefit is potential and strong, I think it's a favorable ratio. So I go for it.
Well, that's how I looked at it with myself, and seeing that my omega-3 index was so low, I thought, okay, let me start to include fish in my diet. Now, this is an N of 1 personal testimonial, but I try to be transparent with my audience about my own journey and also tell them that this is an anecdotal testimony, but I'm going to share it anyway. When I started eating fish and supplementing with fish oil, my brain, I felt, finally turned on after almost a couple years of it feeling progressively like I wasn't exactly like my cheerful, upbeat self. That's my own testimony. I have a few other friends that have gone through that. And I look forward to one day, more research that's available, whether it's through your group or you inspiring other people to work on this, where there might be more conclusive results that are there.
Yeah, but like you said, what matters is what happens to you. And,
Exactly.
Right. And, people can try this and maybe they'll start eating fish and they don't feel any different. Okay, no harm, no foul. But the odds are it's going to make a difference. And it made a difference, particularly if you start really low like you did.
What about Alzheimer's and dementia? Do we have any more data that shows a more protective impact on these two very scary diagnoses when it comes to omega-3s?
Yeah, we do. And we just published a couple of weeks ago, maybe a large study looking at, again, what we typically do, omega-3 levels in the blood. DHA, I believe, was our primary focus on that one. And looked at risk for developing dementia or Alzheimer's disease. This was in a large group of people in England. And we found the same story we found in others have found too, people with the highest levels of omega-3 at the beginning of the study, which is typically when people in their 40s or 50s when these studies start. The risk for developing dementia is reduced. And nobody's going to prevent Alzheimer's disease. They're not going to prevent dementia. They're going to put it off until you die of something else. That's the best you can ever hope for. People talk about preventing the disease. It's not what they mean is delaying the disease, and that's what we all want to do. That's increasing your health span, right? And so the omega-3s are certainly strongly linked with a reduced risk for developing them. So since we have no treatment, whatever, for these debilitating conditions that we all know about and we all fear more than we fear heart attacks by and large, definitely take more omega-3 to help reduce your risk for that. That's a no-brainer. Pardon the pun.
It's the best brainer that you could do. It's the best brainer.
Best brainer.
If you care about your brain health, there you go. Let's go to a few other areas inside of the body and things that people struggle with. High blood pressure is one of those things that so many people struggle with today.
Yeah.
And there's often advice that's given. Okay, you care about your blood pressure. The primary one that's shared with individuals, drinking a lot of water and making sure you're hydrated, and also not having too much salt in the diet and sodium in particular.
Right.
The challenge that I have, the little beef that I have, is that with sodium in particular, most of the sodium and salt that people are getting in their diet is coming from ultra processed food. It's not from the sea salt that we decide to add to a little, great piece of salmon that we're cooking. It's hidden. It's bread rolls and these other things that are ultra processed in the diet. But nonetheless, to bring it back to it, lowering blood pressure and the impact of omega-3s. What can you tell us about that?
Yeah, in that category, the studies have looked, the ones that have been most effective have used pretty high intakes of EPA and DHA, maybe 3 to 4 grams a day, which is, the typical American, just for perspective, typical Americans eating that's not taking a fish oil supplement is getting maybe 0.1 to 0.2 grams a day of EPA DHA, 100 to 200 milligrams a day in their diet. And we're talking about doses here that I just mentioned for blood pressure in the 1,000 to 2,000 milligram a day, which is a very easy to get dose. But it's a higher dose than maybe just triglyceride lowering might give you, which we might talk about later. It's doable. It's a minor. It's not a major effect on blood pressure. It's a sign that your blood vessels are healthier. Your blood vessels are more compliant, more flexible, more able to respond to the heart pushing all that blood out, and you don't end up with the high blood pressure. So it's good for blood pressure, as well as a variety of other things we'll talk about here.
Any study that I didn't mention that strongly drives home the evidence around omega-3s and its association with positive outcomes in the body? I know there's so many to choose from, but if there was one or maybe two that I didn't highlight that really drove it home for the audience, anything that you want to mention?
Yeah, I think what we hear so much about is inflammation, chronic low-grade inflammation from our diet and our lifestyle and maybe pollution in the air. All these things are pushing our bodies toward a kind of a chronic inflammatory state. Now, I think the thing that we've seen with omega-3 is that how do they work? People say, and it's kind of complicated to explain how they work. It's not like a drug that has just one target and bang, you can say this drug fixes that thing. Omega-3s are in every cell membrane. They do good things everywhere, and by about 15 different mechanisms they do it. But the thing that really counts, it maybe largely comes down to anti-inflammatory. They are just they put the brakes on, they soften the inflammatory response. And I think that plays out in in dementia, plays out in cardiovascular disease, probably plays out in the way even the blood is a little bit thinner when you take more omega-3. So your blood's less likely to clot in a bad place. That's also part of the good benefits. So inflammation is the one word I would use to describe all the benefits of omega-3. And we saw that in Framingham in our cohort that we looked at. we looked at 10 different blood markers of inflammation, and we correlated those blood markers with the omega-3 level. And for every one of them, higher omega-3, lower inflammatory marker. It's just been shown so many times. There's no question about it anymore.
Give us a sense of how, and I know you don't like the word deficient because deficiency implies something incorrect, but give us a sense of how much this key nutrient is missing from our diets, especially here in North America.
Yeah. And because I'm trained in nutrition, in nutrition, you learn that to be deficient, there's like being deficient in vitamin C. You have scurvy. Okay, your teeth fall out. All right, and really bad stuff happens. Vitamin D and rickets, your bones bend and break real easily. Well, deficiency in the omega-3 is not that stark. It's a long-term subtle thing. So I'd say insufficiency is maybe a little bit better term. But in the United States, if we ask how many people or what percent are what I would call suboptimal, and optimal, I will say, is an omega-3 index, which we'll talk about, of over 8%. We're talking about 90 to 95% of people
are not optimal.
Are not optimal. They are, but to be not optimal is not necessarily to be deficient. It's to be suboptimal. You could be better, and you could be up in a zone that's protective. The average omega-3 level in America is roughly 5.5, maybe. If you throw it across, we're working on a project right now to kind of define the omega-3 index of every country in the world we can figure out. And Canada, United States, we're sort of in that intermediate zone where you're not awful, you're not all vegans, but you're not optimal like the Japanese are, where they're on average, they're 9 or 10% omega-3 index, which is great. So the vast majority of people on Western diets, not just Americans, people who do not eat fish every day, like some cultures do, Japan, South Korea, they have really high omega-3 index because they eat fish a lot.
Was there ever a time here, specifically in North America, that you think we were in our more optimal range? If you look at dietary patterns, excluding out native populations, were we ever at a time where we would be at a much higher omega index? And part of that is asking, what have been the factors that have led to us having lower omega-3s on average in our diet? Is it just simply the absence of fish, or have we prioritized other things like ultra-processed foods that have crowded out a lot of the good things?
Yeah, I think it's both and. I think definitely the lack of fish in the diet. And historically, there were certainly people on the coasts were much more dependent upon the food that comes right out of the sea, because we didn't have refrigeration. We couldn't transport things around the country. You had to eat what was there. And there was a lot of fish on the coast. So I suppose, excuse me, that omega-3 levels, if we've been able to measure them 100, 200 years ago, in coastal populations would have been higher, but not necessarily in South Dakota, where I am. And I don't really know that we ever were, certainly as a country, high in omega-3. People have been tried to raise concerns that omega-6 fatty acid intake has come up over the time. I don't think that's been a reason why we have low omega-3. And we can talk about omega-6 later if you'd like to. But at this point, again, if you don't eat fish very regularly, you're not going to have a high omega-3 level. It just doesn't happen.
What's the relationship between omega-3s, triglycerides, and generally, these markers like triglycerides, HDL, LDL? How do you think about omega-3 and their influence on those?
Yeah, I think one of the first effects of omega-3 that was discovered, and we were part of the discovery of that in the late 1970s, early 80s, was that omega-3s are particularly effective in lowering one of the blood fats called blood triglycerides. So the other one is cholesterol. This is the blood. Omega-3s don't lower cholesterol. Never really have. At least in the good, well-controlled studies, you don't see a lowering of cholesterol, but you will definitely see a lowering of triglycerides. And that's because the omega-3s will block the production of those molecules in the liver so they don't get sent out in the blood. So you reduce the levels. That's a good thing. Then the other things are LDL cholesterol, what some people call bad cholesterol. I hate to use that term because it's the bad particles. It's not bad cholesterol. Cholesterol is cholesterol. It's neutral. But LDL particles, which carry a lot of cholesterol, are not affected by fish oils intake. HDL particles, the good particles, their levels can be raised a little bit by fish oil. So that's actually lowering triglycerides helps raise the HDL. They're kind of on a seesaw in a way. So you'll definitely see an improvement in the lipid profile, but don't expect to see your cholesterol level go down. You start taking fish oil.
If I know you said it was complicated, and it is complicated, and on a cellular level, if you were explaining this to, let's say, a 6th grader, an 8th grader, if we were able to see inside of the body, and which we are, obviously we have we have different medical tools that enable that to happen.
Yeah.
When fish oil, omega-3s enters into the body on a regular basis, what's its impact on the cell? Like, what is it actually doing on the cells in our body? If we would try to make it easy to understand, even though I know it's incredibly complicated.
It's complicated. Yeah. I think a reason, there's metaphors, there's analogies for it. I think people have often used the fact that fish oil is an oil. Then you think about oil in your car and having enough oil in the engine to lubricate all the cylinders as they go up and down. If you're low on oil, you're going to have a lot of friction, and that's going to create heat. That's like inflammation. So I think that's one way of looking at it, that if you're low on omega-3, you're essentially kind of low on oil, and your cells are there's just going to be friction. There's going to be inability to respond. Like every cell has to respond to the outside environment, and it's a very finely tuned, finely designed system. And if the cell membrane, which is really almost one of the most important parts of the cell, the membrane which decides what goes in, what goes out, that is very much dependent upon the fluidity of that membrane is important, and the flexibility of that membrane. And if you have too little omega-3, the membrane just doesn't operate well. And so you get garbled communication between the outside and the inside. And so things just don't go well.
Indeed, they definitely don't go well when we, especially so many Americans being in that bottom cohort of people that are incredibly insufficient and don't have enough omega-3s.
Yeah.
Talk to our audience a little about EPA and DHA, and let's expand a little bit more from omega-3's top line to going into a little bit more about EPA and DHA and why it's important to understand these two uniquely.
Yeah, and let me start with ALA, the plant omega-3, which you were very familiar with as a vegan, of course. That is a form of omega-3 fatty acids. It's kind of like a poor second cousin in a way. It is, strictly speaking, it has the right last name. Omega-3 is correct, but the first name is wrong. Alpha-linolenic, it's a precursor, a poor precursor to EPA and DHA, which can be made from it, but not very well at all, and you get very low levels. So to get EPA and DHA, which are the two that are in fish oils or in marine animals, they actually start in the oceans where they're made. To get those two, you really have to eat them preformed, meaning in seafoods. And great, you mentioned a few of them: salmon, mackerel, herring, sardines, anchovies. Albacore tuna is a good one as well. So those are all great sources of EPA and DHA. And EPA and DHA have different roles in the body. They're different chemical structures, very similar, but slightly different. And they are made in, each one of them is made into other molecules by different enzyme systems in the body that have anti-inflammatory or other beneficial effects. I always think, I never recommend that people just take EPA or just take DHA, because they come together naturally in fish, always together. They're in fish oils always together, unless you process it strongly just to remove one or the other. And I don't see any point in that. I think the smartest thing to do is get, roughly, 50-50, 40-60% EPA and DHA in the supplement. That's kind of the range that it's in fish. And so that's, I think, the best way to go.
You touched on it a little bit, but I'd like to come back to it, because when I was vegan, one of the things that I would talk about with people, because I was just repeating what I had heard, is that I would tell people, well, there's plenty of animals that don't eat fish and they're able to be successful. Talk to us about why human beings in particular are really bad at converting ALA into the necessary molecules to be able to turn into the same impact that you get from fish or fish oil supplementation.
Yeah, that's a great question. So deer and buffalo and parrots and all kinds of other animals don't eat fish, right? How do they live? And it's a reasonable question. And why is omega-3 so important for humans and apparently not for horses, which are, vegetarian, vegans? And tell you the truth, I never thought about that. It's a great question. And how you answer it, I think every animal is designed to, most all these animals we think about live in the natural environment in which they were designed to be. Humans are not. We can create our own food. We can transport our own food. Deer and ground squirrels don't do that. They're eating the natural environment. They're designed and built in such a way that they have their cells work in given the food that they are set up to eat. But humans, we can avoid. We eat not just by necessity. We eat by taste. We eat by culture. And again, we can process foods in a way that no other animal can do. And so that has all, I think, led to humans needing or being low in this particular kind of food. You think about back to cavemen and what did they used to eat? A mixture of plant and animal for sure. But they were probably eating fish. I mean, you've got to, if you're going to have a civilization that grows up, you've got to be by water. You have to be by a river. If you're not on the coast. Even being on the coast is not very helpful because you can't drink seawater. You got to be by fresh water. And there's always fish in water. And so fish has been there ever since humans ever appeared on this planet. And they've been part of the diet. And I think the fact that we've got so out of balance now is just a function largely of what food industry can do and produce for our taste, and whatever tastes good, we go for. And if it's cheap, we go for it. So I know I'm dancing around your question because I don't
no, that's a great answer. No, that's a great answer. And I mean, really what I fundamentally hear you partially saying, and anybody that's read the work of Yuval Noah Harari and the book Sapiens understands that there was a concentrated period where the human brain exploded in size. And we were able to do things that our, certain relatively close ancestors in DNA, other species, were not able to do. We were able to tell stories. We were able to make tools. We were able to create civilization. And a big part of that, at least the going theory is, it was our ability to concentrate calories and not spend so much time digesting raw food all day and leaves, and being able to get nutrients in concentrated forms. So if we want to maintain this ability of our human brain, we have to make sure that we did the things that most likely we evolutionary had access to. And it seems that fish was a big part of our diet
I
prehistorically.
agree. Fish was a big part of our diet, right? And learning, and nobody else can do fire. We can do fire. No other animal knows how to handle and use fire, and it's a huge deal. I mean, we would have no metallurgy, we would have no machinery if we couldn't figure out how to melt metals, smelt ores with fire. Never mind the cooking side of it too, which made some nutrients more accessible from foods that we would not otherwise derive the nutrients. So fire maker, it's a big deal.
It's a huge deal. If you go to Times Square today or any other public place, Hollywood Boulevard, I'm located here in Los Angeles, and you ask a random group of people, sort of man on the street interview style, and you say, hey, do you eat a healthy diet? The average person comes back to you and is like, yeah, I try to be healthy, because everybody has a different definition of what healthy means to them. For one person, it might mean they only smoke 1 pack of cigarettes a month. For another person, it means instead of having 3 Coca-Colas a day, they have 1 and 1 Diet Coca-Cola a day.
Coke. Right.
Everybody has a different definition. And I've seen the same thing goes with fish. And you've talked about this in your work. You have instrumentally talked about how important it is to both consider fish intake, and especially from the right fish, as well as supplementation. But let's talk about the fish and the dietary side of it. How much fish do we need to be eating if we want to be optimal, which is what my audience and I are looking for?
Yeah, right. And the first question is, what kind of fish? Before we talk about, because there is a wide variety of omega-3 richness or lack of richness in fish. On the low end of omega-3 in fish, you've got things like tilapia and cod and perch and bass and like a lot of lake fish. Shrimp, almost nothing there. Lobster, almost nothing. Because these are very, very low fat, protein rich types of animals, foods. And if there's very little fat, even if 50% of the fat is omega-3, which it's not, if there's hardly any fat there, you don't really get much omega-3 when you eat a serving. So those kinds of fish don't count for when we think about telling people we mean oily fish. And when we say oily, it's always kind of an odd expression, but people hopefully will realize fish that are like salmon, like sardines, like mackerel, herrings, and anchovies. I don't know anybody who eats anchovies straight up, other than maybe on a Caesar salad or on a pizza. But anyway, anchovies are very rich in omega-3. One of the good sources of fish oil is anchovy. So there are certain kinds of fish that are very good, some kinds that are pointless, useless. And so when we talk about how much oily fish do you need to eat, if we take salmon as the best example, you can get about a gram and a half of omega-3 EPA DHA from a standard size serving of salmon. So that's a lot. So if you did that every day, if you ate salmon every day, then you would not need to take any supplements.
Like they do in Japan, Korea, you were mentioning.
Right, exactly, right. And not that they eat salmon every day, but they eat such a wide variety of different kinds of fish, including the rich oily fish, tunas, things like that. So 1 to 2 servings, 1 serving a day of those kind of things, people usually recommend, like the American Heart Association, 2 oily fish servings a week. I don't think that's enough. That's better than most people can do or do, but it's not enough, which is why I think we need supplements. We did a study, I think you may be referring to it, looking at the omega-3 index in like 3,000 people that sent in blood tests to our laboratory for analysis. And we asked them, do you take a fish oil supplement? Yes, no. How often do you eat oily fish as a main course? So those are pretty rough questions. I mean, not very precise, but they're not bad. And we found that the only group of people that had a average omega-3 index at 8%, which is we think our target, are people that reported 3 times a week eating oily fish and taking supplements. So that's a ballpark idea of what you got to do to achieve a optimal omega-3 index. It can be done all with supplements. It can be done all with fish. I like to see the mix myself, and that's what we observe.
Hey YouTube, if you enjoyed what you just saw, keep watching for more great content on how to improve your brain and your life.
This is one of those things that's been vilified, that it's so bad for us. Why is the very thing we know for certain that humans are designed to consume, when we are born, why is that thing so bad?